Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This story is about what if a cultivator was reincarnated into the world of One Piece. Now onto the video.
Sanji came back with all the salt they had on the ship, the sight of which made the zombies start crying and begging for mercy. They were almost pitiable, if it hadn't been likely that they were the parasitic puppets of some madman who steals shadows from people. The group exorcised the zombies in short order and started making their way further into the island. "Excuse me, can you wait a moment?" A voice came from a figure coming out of some nearby bushes. "Another zombie?" Luffy shouted, stretching his arm and stuffing a handful of salt into the figure's mouth. "That one isn't a zombie, Luffy. He's just a beat-up old guy," Cherry said, as the old man spit out the salt in his mouth. "I was watching you guys, and I can see you're all really strong. I'd like to ask you to defeat someone for me," he said, scraping the remnants of the salt off his tongue. "Oh, who's that then?" Frankie asked. "He's the man who stole my shadow, as well as the shadows of many other people hiding here on the island. If you beat him, our shadows should return to us and we'll all be eternally grateful." He prostrated himself, which was clearly difficult due to his advanced age and injuries. "His name is Gecko Moria," the old man said grimly. "Oh, I know who that is. Gecko Moria is one of the current Shichibukai. His original bounty was 320 million if I recall correctly," Robin said unworriedly. No one else in their group seemed particularly fazed by this information either. "Hey, I know you guys are strong, but don't underestimate him. Even if I think you can win, it won't be that easy, you know," the old man said, not wanting his potential saviors to lose because of overconfidence, and as a result give Moria even more powerful subordinates. "Don't worry about us, old man. We're all powerhouses in our own right, especially my darling Cherry and Robin," Sanji assured him. "We'll get your shadow back no matter what, old man." "Super," Frankie exclaimed. Shishi. We were already going to kick Moria's ass, so we'll save you and the others while we're at it," Luffy promised. "Ah, then I'll place my hopes in you then," the old man said with another bow. Back in Dr. Hogback's mansion, the group of 5 made their way back down to the dining room, intending to leave through the door they came in if they could. The dinging room was empty, with no Dr. Hogback or Sindri in sight. Serene picked up a handwritten note on the table and read it aloud. "I apologize that I must attend to some time-sensitive business in my lab. I do hope we can speak more soon. In the meantime, Hilden will show you to some guest rooms to rest in. He has been reprimanded for his previous behavior in the graveyard, and should not give you any more trouble." Serene read. "Hilden isn't here yet, so we should take this chance to leave," Nami suggested. "Why leave so soon?" "I hope it isn't on my account. I am sorry for mistreating you. I am a troubled soul. Dr. Hogback is very patient and generous to employ one such as myself," Hilden said, dangling from the chandelier. "Our friends should be getting worried about us by now, so we really should head back," Usopp said, backing towards the door. "Oh? Well, before you go, I believe Dr. Chopper wanted an autograph, did you not? You can leave right afterwards," Hilden replied. I don't want to disturb the doctor and we should really get going," Chopper said. "Just forget about it, Hilden, they're already too suspicious." A voice came from one of the paintings on the wall. "The painting talked?" Chopper squealed. "I won't let you leave." The painting of a woman lurched outwards at Chopper to grab him. The whole room came alive, the painting, the mounted heads, the bearskin rug. They fought against the zombies to get to the entrance. Usopp used fire to frighten them enough to make a path. However, the door was locked and was too thick for them to break through. They stumbled around the ROM trying to flee when they backed into the large fireplace, causing the wall in the back to swivel, revealing a secret passage. Eventually they managed to get away from the pursuing zombies and found a spot with no paintings on the walls to rest. A large door was one side of the hallway from which they heard a voice. They decided to peek inside. Foss. I'm nearly finished with this marionette. It turned out quite well, don't you think, Sindri?" Hogback said. "I think it's your worst work yet," Sindri replied viciously in her usual monotone. "You don't have to be so mean about it," Hogback said, depressed. "Here's your dinner, chicken noodle soup," Sindri said, dumping it out of a bag directly onto the table. "It looks like he's working on making a zombie," Usopp whispered. "From the discoloration of the skin, I would say they aren't alive," Chopper observed. "Bah," Mary bleated softly. "Huh?" Chopper said, turning around. "What's wrong? What did Mary say?" Nami asked, turning around as well. But she soon got the answer to her question. "Yo ho ho, you're not supposed to be here," a zombie with a sword on his hip said. He drew his sword and slashed out towards them, but the strike cut apart the door behind them instead. Why are you here?" Hogback exclaimed. "I suppose it doesn't matter what you found out. Soon the night attack will begin. Why are you going this? How have you fallen so far?" Serene couldn't contain herself any longer. "Why? Because I crave the best things in life, Serene. With Moria I can have wealth and a beautiful trophy wife who will never age. When Moria becomes king of the pirates, I'll have great influence as well. Why don't you join up with Moria too, Serene? He's always in need of competent subordinates, and my recommendation can make that happen. Hogback offered. What about them? Serene asked, looking at the others. I'm afraid they'll have their shadows added to our ranks, but they won't die. So what will it be? Hogback replied. Serene remained silent. You can't be seriously considering that, Serene? He's crazy. Nami said. I accept, Serene said, on the condition that they aren't harmed. Sure. Aside from taking their shadows, they won't be harmed. Phos. I knew you'd make the right choice, as expected of my daughter. Hogback said. Nami studied Serene. She hoped this was just the means to buy time for the others to come find them. Yo-ho-ho, so we'll have another beautiful lady joining our crew? Do you mind if I see your panties? The samurai zombie said, Get lost, freak. Serene only liked skeletons, not all dead people. She had standards. The other group arrived outside Hogback's mansion. Hello, at anyone home? Luffy called out. He grabbed the handle and pulled open the door, despite it being locked. Ah, it's open. If you break it open, of course it would be, idiot. Zoro said. What appeared to be a dining room was on the other side, but it had been made quite the mess of. Gecko Moria, are you here? Oh, you know the name of our master, and yet you still came here? You're quite bold. Attack! A pig's head on the wall spoke. The room came to life and everything around them attacked. Half a minute later, the various zombies had been beaten down and most had been exorcised with salt except the pig who seemed to be in charge. Why don't you tell us where our friends are, little piggy? Unless you'd like to become a salt-cured ham? Cherry asked, holding his mouth open and holding a ball of salt with the other hand. I'll talk. Those 5 are resting in the guest rooms prepared for them further inside up those stairs. They're safe and sound, I swear. He squealed. Cherry stuffed the salt ball into his mouth whilst he screamed. I guess I should have told you I already know where they are. I was just testing you. Chapter 88, The Cutest in the World. Cherry and company made their way towards where the others were. It was pretty easy to locate them as most of the island's residents were zombies, and having 3 familiar devil fruit users amongst them. Cherry also noticed one of the devil fruit users heading toward the Thousand Sunny, but she wasn't particularly concerned about them. Cabernet was guarding the ship and should be able to handle it by herself. Even if she couldn't, she was so tough that there would be plenty of time for Cherry to return before she was defeated. Should we split up? Finding the others will be easy enough and we can use the time to whittle away at the zombies before having a showdown with Moria. Cherry suggested. The others thought that was an amenable suggestion and paired off Cherry with Robin, taking the unconscious invisible man with them, Luffy with Sanji and Zoro with Frankie. Don't get your shadow stolen or I'll show you what real hellish training looks like, Cherry threatened. Then she looked at Frankie. As for you, instead I'll mix strange things into your cola so you'll be acting funny until our next stop. How can you be so cruel? That's not super at all, Frankie complained. Cherry and Robin went after the others as they likely needed rescuing, whilst the other 2 pairs went around fighting zombies and exorcising them. It didn't take long to reach their destination, a garden full of animal-type zombies. Only 4 of them were present, however, Serene being the missing person. Cherry, Robin, Chopper shouted, so happy to see them he was crying. Absalom, what did you do to my husband? A hippo zombie in a wedding dress cried in alarm. She charged towards them without another word in a rage. Cherry drew her revolver and fired it at her. She didn't bother to dodge, believing that she wouldn't be harmed as a zombie. She was wrong. Cherry had created some special salt ammunition during the walk, so when the hippo bride zombie was hit, she slumped over as her shadow escaped her. She shot Lola and it worked? She's a general zombie, what chance do we have? A panda zombie exclaimed in fear. She won't have endless ammunition. She can't shoot all of us. A dog zombie replied. The zombies decided to fight for their unlives, a foolish decision that ended with all of them being exorcised in short order by Cherry and Robin. So where did they take Serene? Robin asked the others. She said she would join them in exchange for not harming us. Usopp said, feeling ashamed of his weakness. They caught Cherry and Robin up on everything that had happened to them. I see, I won't hold it against her, I guess. Cherry said. What's that glow on the horizon? Nami asked. That should be Cabernet. It seems she's going all out, Cherry said, noting that the devil fruit user that went to the ship had already fled. On the Thousand Sunny with Cabernet. Who are you? Cabernet asked curiously, gazing upon the pink-haired young woman with a small army of zombies behind her. Horo. I'm one of the mysterious 4, Perona, and I'm your worst nightmare, Bloodwine Cabernet. Perona spoke confidently. Wow, you're so cute. Cabernet gushed. Shut up, I don't need you to tell me that. I know I'm the cutest in the whole world, unlike you who isn't cute at all. Perona insulted. Cabernet looked genuinely hurt by those words, looking much like an injured puppy. Eh? Perona stuttered in shock. How can this demonic gangster woman have such an adorable look on that face? Attack! Steal the treasure and capture the woman, Perona ordered, not losing sight of her goal in coming here. Whoosh! A wave of flames descended on the zombies, causing them to stagger back in fear. Cabernet's hurt look was gone, replaced with a cold rage. Perona felt like she'd lost something precious in that moment. Cabernet said nothing more and threw herself amongst the zombies. Her flames were so intense that any zombies that came too close ignited and started to turn to ash in seconds. Perona sent her ghosts towards her and found purchase with them. Cabernet's adorably sad look returned. I'm so stupid. I should have known I couldn't be friends with such a cute girl with a horrible face like mine. Despite the ghosts having a clear effect on Cabernet's mental state, her actions seemed to suggest the opposite was true, as she continued to brutalize the panicking zombies. This was because Cherry had told her to guard the ship, as such she wasn't acting on her own will. The zombies were trying to flee into the forest. But their actions only prolonged their terror, as none would escape Cabernet in the end. Perona slipped away quickly and quietly. I need to get away from here. I wasn't prepared to deal with such an adorable, terrifying woman. What is wrong with me? Where am I? What was I doing? Absalom started to wake up. He opened his eyes and saw the form of Lola lying next to him. Lola, did you knock me out and tie me up? Release me immediately. However, Lola did not stir even an inch and remained silent. Lola? Absalom looked around and saw Cherry smirking at him, then he remembered what had happened to him. I'd like you to answer some questions for me, Cherry said slowly and approached him. There's no way I'll answer your cute questions. Absalom spoke with false bravery as he struggled against his bindings. He stopped when Cherry placed her sword between his legs. You'll talk, because perverts like you value their manhood more than anything. Who are you calling a pervert? I'm a respectable gentleman. Absalom roared, but inside he was terrified. Oh please, you're a man with the devil fruit ability to become invisible. Of course you're a pervert. Cherry accused, making the sword hum with a dangerous energy. Okay, I'll talk, just don't cut it off please. Absalom started to cry pathetically. Where do you keep the treasure? Cherry started her questions, much to the approval of Nami. Absalom answered the questions without resistance, though he did try to lie a few times. He couldn't hide from Cherry though, as he wasn't a particularly good liar. Speaking of liars, Cherry rather admired Usopp's ability to lie. He was often caught by the absurd and outlandish nature of his lies, but he did it so naturally that he didn't show the usual physical signs that one was lying. Cherry got all the information she wanted from the stitched-together freak, and promptly knocked him out. Okay then, we can go steal all the treasure, then we can change the course of the thriller bark to make up for some lost time. If Luffy still hasn't beaten Moria by then, I'll deal with him myself. Sound like a plan? Cherry asked, getting the assent from the others. They entered the main building of Thriller Bark in search of the treasury, exorcising zombies as they go. Along the way they ran into a pink-haired woman with singed clothing, alongside a strange-looking bear zombie. Oh, how did you like my sweet Cabernet? Isn't she just the cutest? Cherry asked, knowing she was the one who tried to board the Thousand Sunny. Yes, no, I'm the cutest one, damn it. Persona angrily shot several of her ghosts towards them. They passed through the lot of them, causing them to fall into a deep depression. We never would have gotten into this mess if I'd been a better navigator. I'm just the worst. Nami said. That bastard Hogback doesn't give a hoot about his patients, but even he is a better doctor than I am. I should just die, Chopper said. Ba. Such a terrible ship that she couldn't carry her beloved crew to the end of their journey. I've got the nerve to say I'll discover the true history even though I'm too cowardly to, Robin said, before a hand bloomed from her back and covered her mouth. Except for Cherry and Usopp, who were both unaffected for some reason. Wow, Usopp, I didn't expect you to possess such strength of will. Cherry praised. Oh, of course I'm going to be a brave warrior of the sea, so that's only natural, Usopp lied through his teeth. Cherry herself wasn't affected because existential dread wasn't anything new for a cultivator. Cultivators face that feeling every single day, so she was quite accustomed to it. Why else would someone pursue eternity if not to avoid the end? Why aren't you two affected at all? Even that cutie demon could only half resist, and that's strange enough as it is. Perona felt wrong that so many people could resist her power. Since you aren't affected by it either, why don't you fight her, Usopp? She doesn't seem too strong, so you should be able to handle her. Cherry suggested, and you better hurry up, she's getting away, huh? Usopp looked over and saw the woman running away with her bear zombie, then he pursued her. Cherry's right, I can't just be a tag-along, I need to pull my own weight. The other four started coming out of their depression about this time. Let's go, Usopp will catch up later. He's a tough fellow, he'll be okay. Cherry said, and they moved on. Chapter 89, Bartholomew Kuma. The group found their way to the treasurer, which was guarded by a number of zombies that were easily dispatched. Alright, Nami, do your thing and we'll keep watch. Cherry said, gesturing towards the large lock on the door. Breaking it open was an option too, but why use force when finesse will work just fine? Yo. Yo ho ho ho, I've found some thieves, it would seem. A vaguely familiar voice sounded out. They turned to see a samurai zombie approaching them. Smash. Brooke came flying through a closed window and made a graceful landing. If by graceful landing you meant uncontrollably tumbling, finished off with a faceplant into the opposing wall. Oh dear, I must really watch where I'm going, though I don't have eyes to watch with. Yo ho ho. Brooke said, picking himself up out of the broken glass. Good timing, Brooke. Your shadow is just over there, inside that samurai zombie. You'll take care of him while we loot the place, yeah? Cherry said, bemused. Oh, so he is. I've been training for 5 years to defeat you. I shan't lose to you this time. Brooke shouted and attacked the samurai zombie. In the meantime, Nami got the lock open and went inside with Chopper, Mary and Robin to grab the gold. Cherry stayed outside to watch the door, and more importantly to observe Brooke's fight with the samurai zombie. He's not bad, but his insistence on defending that afro of his isn't making things easier on him. Though by the looks of things, that samurai fellow is only toying with him. Cherry thought. Brooke, why are you defending your hair like it's your heart or something? Isn't getting your shadow back more important than your vanity? Cherry called out. I can't grow it back because I'm a skeleton. Moreover, this afro of mine is my heart. It's the only thing that has kept me going all these decades I've been alone. Brooke replied, fending off the samurai zombie. Cherry felt there was more to his words than they seemed on the surface. I can grow your hair back as much as you like. How about that? I've no reason to lie because I can kick that guy's rotten ass whenever I want. Cherry shouted. Brooke didn't dare to look back at her, but he felt that she was speaking the truth. Though they've only known one another a short time, he felt the young woman was very mysterious. Wait a moment, he thought. You can defeat him anytime you like? Then why aren't you doing just that? Brooke asked. Don't you want to defeat him yourself for the sake of your pride or something? Cherry asked in return. Screw that, I've got a promise to keep, just kill him, Brooke replied. Yo ho ho. Do you think it will be that easy to deal with me? The zombie samurai's words were interrupted when Cherry vanished and reappeared with her revolver stuck into his mouth. Bang! A shot was fired before he could react and he felt his shadow leaving him. Salt? What a dirty trick. His final words rang out. Yo ho ho ho. My shadow is back where it belongs. Brooke rejoiced. Cherry picked up the sword the samurai zombie was using. This isn't bad. A bit of a bad temper though, not to my liking. What, that's the sword of a legendary samurai of the Wano country and you think it's not bad? It's a great grade Mato and a black blade on top of that. Brooke couldn't believe what he was hearing. As a swordsman, how could he stay silent? Cherry gave him a look and simply drew her own sword, converting the blade to lightning and back. Oh, Brooke couldn't really find a fault with her statement when she had a sword that can turn into lightning at will. Do you know the name of this sword? Cherry asked him, but he shook his head. Well, I'll have to ask it myself then. Brooke didn't know what she meant by that. Cherry tapped the blade with a finger, causing it to hum like a tuning fork, and held it to her ear. Shusui is it? Cherry said, but kept listening. That's rude. If you put it that way, maybe I'll chuck you into the ocean? Fine, I'll find you a proper wielder. And I thought I was the one who went crazy, Brooke muttered under his breath. Nami and the others came out of the treasure room dragging every bit of gold along with them. Now to find the helm and steer us off course, they should possess some way to navigate even with the interference with the log pose, Nami said. And so they set off once more. A thunderous boom sounded and the building shook. Seems like Luffy found Moria, Cherry grinned, back on the Thousand Sunny. Where once there was a spooky forest, now only the smoldering stumps of trees could be seen. On the sea next to these ruined trees an untouched ship was anchored. Cabernet was lying on her back in the grass on the deck, looking up into the swirling fog to find unusual shapes to relieve her boredom. She heard someone walking over to the ship on the dock. She peered over the edge of the ship at the approaching figure. A very tall man wearing a black shirt with paw prints and a large crosshair, white pants with spots, a white spotted cap with bare ears poking out, and gloves. He had long curly hair, a strong jaw, and blank white eyes. In his left hand he held a Bible. Come no further, adorable bear man, Cabernet called out. Bartholomew Kuma stopped walking and looked up at her. Bloodwine Cabernet, bounty of 275 million berry. He said simply. If you were to go on vacation, where would you go? I'll go wherever Cherry wants me to go, though I'd like to stay with the others, Cabernet answered honestly. Kuma observed her for a moment, then turned to go further into the island to complete her mission. He wouldn't act against the Straw Hats unless Gecko Moria asked him for help, which would never happen. Savior, this time you have together. The time of your separation may come sooner than you expect. He thought to himself. I want to touch his ears, thought Cabernet. Gecko Moria was an awfully slippery fellow for a man of his size. Luffy chased him all over the place, but he almost always managed to slip away from him. Almost because Luffy did get a few sneaky attacks in, Luffy lost track of him when he switched places with his own shadow. Cherry was watching the fight without much interest. Moria wasn't as strong as he was cunning. She watched as he escaped into the forest below where he ran into a newcomer to Thriller Bark. Who's this now? Cherry wondered. Chapter 90, Teddy Bear. Cherry carefully Cherry carefully snuck up on the newcomer and Moria through the forest. When she found a good vantage point, she saw the large man with little bear ears speaking to Moria. "What, them, defeat me? I won't be done in by a bunch of upstarts. Crocodile was a fool and a loser, I'm not the same as him." Moria shouted at Kuma, clearly offended. "It appeared that you were running away from them just a moment ago?" Kuma replied monotonously. "Damn you, Kuma, I wasn't running away, I'm just forcing them to split up and search for me, then I'll take their shadows one at a time." Moria exclaimed. "You can ask for my assistance if you need it," Kuma replied. "Never, I have my own pride, I won't ask for your help to kill a few brats." Moria insisted stubbornly. "Very well, in regards to Crocodile, his successor had been chosen." Kuma explained the situation around Marshal D. Teach, also called Blackbeard. Cherry briefly recalled Luffy mentioning the name Blackbeard, and that his brother was apparently hunting the man. Cherry turned her attention to this Kuma fellow, who was apparently another Shichibukai. Most of his body had apparently been replaced with non-living material, similar to Frankie. There was a good chance he was also a cyborg. Another thing she noticed, though it was just her intuition, is that this Kuma fellow is a big softie. She wasn't 100% sure, but she'd bet a lot on that fact. The two Shichibukai finished speaking, and Moria stalked away whilst Kuma went in another direction. Cherry considered whether to follow one of them, and which one if she did. Kuma was going to pass the time until events here were over, then make his report to the world government. He would not go out of his way to help the world government, and certainly not for Moria's sake. Perhaps I can blast away a few of Moria's subordinates to make things difficult for him. Kuma thought, but he suddenly stopped walking. He could feel something tugging on his decorative bear ears. "I'm disappointed, I had hoped they would be real," Cherry said. Kuma swung at her with his pawed hands, but he found no target to strike. He turned around to see Cherry smirking at him from about 10 meters away. "Harpin D. Cherry, also known as Cheapshot, bounty of 350 million berry," he spoke robotically. "That's me, I see you're a big fan of mine. I don't give free autographs, just so you know." Cherry mocked. "If you went on vacation, where would you like to go?" Kuma asked the same question he's asked many people in the past. "That's a tough one. I suppose it would count as a vacation to go knocking on Hawkeye's door and pester him to death," Cherry said thoughtfully, casually sidestepping to avoid Kuma's palm strike. Kuma sent a flurry of attacks towards her, but not a single one touched even a single hair on her head. Which was important as she just finished growing it back. Cherry didn't even look like she was having any trouble dodging at all. "As I thought. I was right about you." Cherry nodded at her own words. Kuma was somewhat curious to what conclusion she has come to about him. "Right about what? You're as much of a big fuzzy huggable teddy bear on the inside as you appear on the outside. Otherwise you wouldn't be holding back right now, I think," Cherry explained with confidence. Kuma was shocked at this, so much so he was thankful for his stoic cyborg face, which was quite a rare occurrence. He was holding back, but not by that much. He was using enough of his ability to pressure a normal pirate with a bounty around 300 million berry. He decided to turn up the heat, firing his mouth beam as well as using his paw fruit to the fullest extent he could. Cherry laughed like she was in an amusement park as she danced around his attacks. It had gotten a bit tougher to do so, but between her superhuman reflexes and observation hockey, it was still manageable. I see. You increase the difficulty because you have something to protect, something secret, and you can't afford to be seen as going easy on pirates, huh?" Cherry was just throwing a guess out there, but from the momentary pause from Kuma, she concluded it to be correct. Kuma stopped his attacks and raised his hands into the air. A pulsing could be heard as a massive sphere in the shape of a paw appeared in the air and started to shrink in his hands. He couldn't use this attack in battle normally as it takes too long to charge up, but Cherry hadn't attacked him yet, so he decided to chance it. Cherry just watched as he condensed the air into a smaller and smaller space, eventually clutching it between his clasped hands. When he opened them towards her, she activated Tekai to the fullest extent that she was able and got blasted backwards along with a large portion of forest. When the dust settled, Cherry came walking out of the mess of dirt and trees, as if she had only been caressed by a gentle breeze. That attack is certainly destructive, but the destruction is too spread out. It'd be much more devastating to hit someone directly with it. Kuma just stared at her silently. He wasn't sure what to do about her except using lethal force, but even that may not be enough. "By the way, that Blackbeard fellow you told Moria about, what did he do to get the world government's attention? It had to have been something big since you said he never even received a bounty before," Cherry asked. "I suppose it will be known to the public soon anyways. He captured Fire Fist Ace and brought him to the Marines," he said. Bells seemed to ring in Cherry's mind. "Ah, so that's how it is. So be it." She sighed and simply walked away from Kuma, then stopped to look at him. "I won't tell anyone you're a revolutionary." Kuma nearly lost his balance at those words. "What? Oh wow, really? Interesting." Cherry grinned at him, then turned away to leave for real this time. She would be a valuable asset to have in the war effort. Something tells me that she wouldn't go for it though. He sighed in defeat and went in a different direction. After a while, Cherry noticed the fog lifting while she enjoyed a bottle of rare wine that she snatched from the kitchen. The light of dawn was threatening to break over the horizon. It would bathe the massive ship with light in less than an hour. Luffy and the others had finally managed to corner and force Moria to fight them properly. Instead of releasing the shadows from his zombies, he chose to absorb them for a massive power-up. Cherry elected not to intervene, as they could handle him just fine without her. Moria's last words before blacking out were something along the line of, "If only I had Oz," whatever that meant. Probably another zombie he never got a shadow good enough to put into. Kuma reported Moria's defeat to his superiors, who then ordered him to destroy the witnesses. Cherry knew he wasn't going to do that though, especially since his real boss is Luffy's father. As expected, he found his own excuses not to eliminate them. A big party was held to celebrate Moria's defeat and the return of the many shadows of his victims. Moria's unconscious body was dragged away by the invisible pervert, and who she presumed to be Dr. Hogback. Strangely, there was no signs of Perona. Cherry was curious when and how she left Thriller Bark, but didn't spare it much thought. Chapter 91, A Friendly Match. The celebration party turned into a welcome party for Brook after he told his story about a certain whale named Laboon, and found out that the Straw Hats had met Laboon still waiting for him after they crossed Reverse Mountain. Serene in particular took to heavy drinking, both to drown her complicated feelings about her father, and to dull the embarrassment from the others teasing her for her noble sacrifice. She quickly turned into the life of the party as she had many party tricks she could do with her massage arts, such as puppeteering people to do awkward poses and silly faces. Although it was an impressive display of precise control over another person's musculature, it took too much setup to be effective in battle. Cherry drank several people under the table, even though she was drinking mugs of hard liquor instead of beer like they were. When Robin noticed how much Cherry was drinking, it was already too late. The second coming of Drunk Cherry was upon them. Drunk Cherry stumbled over to the unconscious Zoro, who she had witnessed absorbing the pain and fatigue from Luffy, courtesy of Kuma in exchange for sparing them. "Cherry?" Chopper asked, unsure what she was doing. "I've always wanted to try something and now's the perfect time, I think." Drunk Cherry slurred. Chopper didn't know why, but he felt like whatever she was up to wasn't anything good, yet he hesitated as Cherry had never done anything to place them in harm's way. Bam. Oof. Zoro woke up with a yelp of pain as Cherry punched him in the chest. "Ah, what are you doing to an injured person?" At this point, Chopper belatedly realized that Cherry must be a bad drunk. "What the hell?" Zoro said, clutching his chest. His heart was pounding so hard he could almost believe it could break his own ribs. "How do you feel?" Drunk Cherry smirked. "What kind of question is that? I feel strong, full of energy." Zoro was confused. It had hurt only a moment ago, but now all the pain was gone, and it was even replaced with an almost euphoric sensation of power. What Drunk Cherry had done was an injection of her vital energy, then fusing it with Zoro's vital energy so it wouldn't be rejected. She didn't have to punch him though, that was just her being mean. Doing this had the effects of increased strength and healing potential. This was only temporary though, as she had only given him a tiny amount. Too much would have a destructive effect if the individual wasn't a cultivator. In fact, an ordinary person wouldn't survive it at all. Mortals had to be tough like Zoro. Zoro started taking off his bandages in spite of Chopper's protests. Chopper stopped fussing when he saw that the wounds underneath had healed extensively, so much so that it would have taken several days normally. "How did you do this, Cherry? Please tell me." Chopper exclaimed. "Devil fruit." Drunk Cherry dampened his mood instantly. "More importantly, look at what I've got, Zoro." Zoro looked at the sword that Drunk Cherry was holding in front of his face and almost started drooling, but then he noticed the evil look in Drunk Cherry's eyes. "Are you just showing off? I won't beg you for it," Zoro said. "You don't need to beg, you just need to last a minute," Drunk Cherry said, lipping her lips. The men in the room started hooting and hollering, telling Zoro to go get her. Robin crushed the teacup in her grip. Zoro didn't misunderstand her though. He knew what she was actually saying. He grabbed his swords and stood up, walking outside. Drunk Cherry staggered behind him, drawing Shusui from its sheath. "Hey, did we get it wrong? It looks like she's gonna kill him?" one of the men asked the guy next to him. Many of the people present decided to go watch. Chopper wanted to stop them, but he was stopped by Luffy, who only smiled. Zoro would have his pride hurt if you tried to stop him now. Robin felt a bit silly for her overreaction to what, in hindsight, was likely just Cherry using weird phrasing on purpose. Outside, a fair ways away from the party, Zoro placed a sword in his mouth and drew his two other swords. "You lose if you surrender or can't fight any longer before the minute's up, and don't you worry, little boy. No matter what happens to your body, Chopper and I can't put you back together good as new, so don't hold back." Time starts with the first clash of swords. Cherry spoke without the slur she had before, her focus being sharpened by bloodlust. Zoro nodded and wasted not time. He charged forward. Cherry brushed his blades aside with her free hand and stabbed the sword towards his abdomen. He twisted and barely dodged it. They continued to dance around in the fashion for about 10 seconds before Zoro realized something. "Shit," she said. "The time starts with the first clash of swords, but she hasn't let me touch her sword at all." He shifted his focus to hitting the sword in her hand at all costs, causing her to chuckle. Another 20 seconds passed when he finally managed to connect his blade with hers. Hey, now that the time has started, let's get serious, shall we? Cherry said mirthfully. Armament Haki coated Shusui and Cherry launched a flurry of flying slashes, leaving no room for Zoro to dodge. He sent his own flying slashes to meet them, but they only slowed them down before they bore down on him. Zoro breathed heavily, enduring the pain of the deep gashes in his body. 55 seconds left. Cherry didn't let up. No, she became even more vicious. 50 seconds. 45 seconds. Seconds. All the people who were previously cheering for the exciting match were now pale as ghosts. They truly thought that Zoro wouldn't survive to the end of this fight. No, it wasn't a fight, it was just a cold-blooded predator toying with her prey. Zoro was a mess at this point. He was covered head to toe with his own blood. He knew he wouldn't have survived this long if not for whatever Cherry had done to him, but he could feel that power fading as well. He needed something more if he was going to win this. Seconds. Zoro's left arm was cut off at the shoulder. Cherry was no longer smiling. Only a stoic expression adorned her face. Her eyes pierced into Zoro like swords. His focus was leaving him, and he fought to keep his eyes open. He saw Luffy and the others watching from the sidelines. His mind wandered back to the moment he promised Luffy that he'd never lose again after he was beaten. Was he going to lose again? His eyes shot open. No! Rah! Zoro screamed through gritted teeth. He used his remaining swords to strike at Cherry with everything he had left. Who cares about the remaining time? I'll just defeat you right now, was what his determined eyes were shouting at Cherry, at the world. Black light ran the length of his blades and clashed against Shusui, pushing Cherry back. A small smile graced Cherry's lips. I surrender. Zoro collapsed only a moment later, and Chopper came rushing over. Get his arm from me, will you, Luffy? Cherry said as she sheathed Shusui, walking over the Zoro. As Cherry said before the fight, it turned out to be very easy to piece Zoro back together with Chopper and her combined efforts. Phew, now that I've sobered up I need another drink, Cherry said loudly. Robin grabbed her into a chokehold and started dragging her back to the ship. I don't think so. Oh come on, it wasn't that bad. Zoro awakened his armament Haki and everything? Okay, I'm sorry, Cherry protested but didn't resist. Her smile said she didn't want to either. Chapter 92, Nico Robin. Robin let Cherry go once they reached the ship's dining room and kitchen. Cherry sat down at the table whilst Robin went to make some coffee for them both. When it was finished, Robin brought a cup over to Cherry and handed it to her. Cherry took it and gave it a sip. You're pretty good at making coffee. Sanji's always taste of cigarette smoke. Don't tell him I said that though. Cherry said. I should make you another coffee cake sometime. Another one? Robin asked. I made the last one we ate together before you left the island. I didn't tell you because I was embarrassed. Cherry smiled, reminiscing over simpler times. Robin giggled. I had thought you had done something to it from the way you smiled then, but you were just happy that I liked it? Your smile has gotten a lot nicer over the years. You think so? Maybe my smile hasn't changed, but just the way you see it? Cherry proffered. Robin blushed slightly. Maybe. Cherry's fingers gently caressed Robin's hand, causing her to turn very red. I like your smile. Cherry almost whispered. Robin gathered her courage. I banged the door flew upon. Robin Swan Cherry-chan, I saw you come back to the ship. Are you hungry? I can make you whatever you like, Sanji enthusiastically shouted as he danced into the kitchen. Robin resisted the urge to use her devil fruit to trip him and just sighed. Cherry was looking at her with a smirk. Then a thought occurred to her. You knew he was coming, didn't you? Robin took Cherry's silence and widening smile as a yes. Sanji, make eggs, I love eggs, drunk Cherry shouted, receiving an excited reply from Sanji. Robin realized that Cherry wasn't as sober as she claimed to be and let it go. Don't drink any more, Cherry. We'll talk in the morning, good night. Cherry started to wake up and felt something was off. When she opened her eyes she was dangling by a rope tied around her foot from the main mast. What the hell? That's it, no more de-drinking, Cherry thought. She tried to remember what happened the night before, but all that came to the surface was scattered images of her cutting Zoro up. Cherry untied herself and went to the dining room to have breakfast with the others. When she opened the door, all eyes rested upon her. Some of them contained a nervous energy, though it wasn't fear. Sorry about last night, whatever I did. I should have known better than to drink that much, but I got caught up in the atmosphere. Cherry apologized sincerely, which improved the mood of the room. Cherry noticed that Zoro was wearing Shusui on his hip. Did drunk Cherry give that to him? She wondered, sitting down at the table. Oh, by the way, I had a chat with Kuma the other night. He told me that some guy called Blackbeard turned ace into the Marines to become a Shichibukai. Cherry said casually, putting bacon into her mouth. What? They exclaimed. Maybe he was lying? Sanji suggested. I don't think so. He said it would be public knowledge soon enough. Cherry replied. What do you want to do, Luffy? Nami asked. I don't mind making a detour. Laboon has waited for me for half a century, there's no rush. Brooke said. Luffy was surprisingly calm. Ace has his own adventure to have. He'd get angry if I treated him like he's weak. There probably isn't anything we can do anyways. Cherry thought what he said was perfectly reasonable, but it didn't exactly sound like the usual Luffy. From what I know about Whitebeard, he'll probably go to war with the world government to save Ace. He's not different from you, Luffy. Cherry said. If you change your mind, I'll fight alongside you. That's right, Usopp exclaimed. Anyways, Zoro awakened Haki during your fight yesterday. Fight me too. I want Haki too. Luffy demanded while stuffing eggs into his mouth. Hee, so that's what happened. I'd been thinking about it for a while, but I was worried it would be too traumatizing. I guess I just ripped off the bandage after loosening my inhibitions. Cherry said. I'm not sure the same method will work for you though, Luffy. That method requires a strong will to win against impossible odds. Zoro can muster that kind of will against me even if I'm a friend, but you're different. Cherry explained. I don't care, let's do it, Luffy insisted. Fine, you win, I'll kick your ass later. Cherry gave up. There was at least a chance it'll work if she tricked him. The crew finished breakfast and went about their business. Robin pulled Cherry aside to talk. About our talk last night. Robin started. Oh, I'm sorry if I said something rude. Cherry said. You don't remember? Anything at all? Robin asked. I drank enough alcohol to kill an elephant, so no. Cherry scratched her head awkwardly, cursing drunk Cherry silently. Oh well, never mind then, Robin said and started walking away. Cherry squinted her eyes at her in suspicion. Would you mind letting me know what we talked about? Cherry asked. It wasn't anything important. Robin turned around answering with a poker face. It's not something you're embarrassed about, and now that you know I don't remember, you've decided to run away? Cherry asked. Robin felt a nervous sweat coming on, but she was an experienced liar. No. Hey ladies. Sanji pranced over. I just want to apologize. I was a bit drunk last night and I think I may have interrupted a private conversation between you two. I'll make you something nice later, so please forgive me. I'll leave you alone now. Sanji pranced away and Cherry turned to look at Robin, whose face was beading with sweat. I won't force you if you don't want to say anything. Cherry tapped her shoulder and went to leave. Wait, Robin stopped her, grabbing her hand. Well, I just want to say. Robin's mind was spinning in circles, she just couldn't say it. Why is this so hard? I've done this sort of thing 100 times, the only difference this time is I mean it. Cherry wasn't stupid, she was 99% sure she knew what was going on. I understand, Robin, just say it, I already know. Cherry reassured her, squeezing her hands lightly. Robin gazed deeply into Cherry's menacing eyes but saw only how beautiful they were. I have feelings for you. Robin said semi-confidently. Eh? Cherry looked shocked. What? You said you knew, why did I say that? Robin started panicking. Pfft, Cherry started giggling. I'm just messing with you, Robin. Cherry brought Robin into a strong hug, and Robin reciprocated, though she was pouting at Cherry's bad joke. This is a first for me, you know. I've never felt this way about anyone before. Cherry said. I haven't either, Robin said. Not that either of us has really had a chance to before now. I was an eccentric training addict for most of life while you've been on the run, Cherry said. Robin giggled. That's true, she felt more comfortable than she'd felt in a long time. So will you teach me how to pawn glyphs now? Cherry asked. No. Robin replied instantly. They parted enough to look at each other. Robin leaned down whilst Cherry tilted her head back. They closed their eyes and slowly drew closer until the moment their lips touched. Gotcha. They turned and saw Nami with a camera Dendenmushi looking at them with a motherly smile. It's about time you two stop dancing around each other. I think I'll start a scrapbook. Nami said as she walked away, quite proud of herself. Robin and Cherry glanced at each other and broke into laughter. I should get a copy from her later. Cherry said. Robin agreed. Chapter 93 Coffee Cake. Cherry, teach me Haki. Luffy was getting impatient. Okay, sheesh, Cherry said exasperatedly, but her smile never left her face. She gave Robin a peck on the cheek and went to find Serene. Once she found Serene, Cherry took her aside to whisper her plans to her. I'll unseal your devil fruit, but you're on probation, you hear me? Here's what I need you to do. Serene nodded in understanding as Cherry explained her plan. She'd be happy to have her devil fruit ability back, though she'd miss having baths without the feeling of weakness. Does anyone else want to have a go at awakening your Haki? Cherry called out, figuring she should just do it all at once. She met Usopp's eyes, but he glanced away, clearly not interested in experience the horror show he witnessed the night before. Sanji? Cherry asked, figuring he had a good shot at it. I cannot kick a woman, that method won't work for me. Sanji said simply. Not even if I promise to do a swimsuit photoshoot if you beat Zoro's time? Cherry smirked. Gay? Sanji had never come so close to betraying his ideals. My answer is still, no. Well, I have another way that'll work for you, so just come along anyways. Cherry waved away his excuses. No one else expressed interest in using this method at this time. Cherry led Luffy, Sanji and Serene to a secluded spot. Once they were alone, Cherry winked at Serene, the signal they agreed upon beforehand. Serene released her hallucinogenic fragrance for the first time in a while, ensnaring the unsuspecting Luffy and Sanji. Cherry simply held her breath, which she could do indefinitely. Luffy walked forward and took a battle stance. "Eh, Ice Guy, what are you doing here?" Cherry had instructed Serene to show them hallucinations that would place them into the right state of mind to awaken Haki. In Luffy's hallucination, Admiral Aokiji shows up out of nowhere and freezes the other three solid, threatening to smash them to pieces. Because it isn't real, Aokiji can't actually lose to him, so he'll be forced to awaken Haki to defend his friends. Sanji's wasn't too different. Nami, Robin and Cabernet come to cheer him on, but Admiral Aokiji freezes all the ladies solid and so on. Cherry just needed to make sure they didn't hurt each other or Serene. If they didn't show any signs of awakening, she'd tell Serene to have Aokiji kill someone. Not a very nice way to force them to get stronger, but they're the ones who signed up for it even after seeing what happened to Zoro. It wasn't too difficult to keep Luffy and Sanji in check, and it didn't take too long until they displayed armament Haki. They both finished around the same time, slower than Zoro. Sanji because he just wasn't as talented, Luffy because he was always a bit slow in getting serious. "Alright, bring them out, Serene," Cherry said, and Serene did as she was bade. "Huh?" Luffy and Sanji said simultaneously, gasping for breath. "Sorry for deceiving you. Serene used her devil fruit powers to make you hallucinate, none of that was real." Cherry explained. "Oh okay." Luffy just accepted it without the slightest hint of anger. "I'm just happy you're okay, Cherry-chan." Serene Swan. Sanji wiggled with infatuation. "Oh, you were slower than Zoro, Sanji? What a shame." Cherry ripped out his hopes and dreams and stomped on them. Sanji was depressed for a while after that. Cherry instructed them to beat each other up for a little while to get the hang of armament Haki, and return to the ship to relax until they were ready to set out again. To her knowledge, they were just waiting for Frankie to finish fixing up Brook's old ship for Moria's victims. Cherry spent the time making a coffee cake for the first time in years. She didn't really know why she suddenly felt like doing so, but she'd be happy to make one for Robin to enjoy. The two enjoyed their first date, chatting over coffee and cake. "Won't you teach me how to read poneglyphs, Robin? I already memorized the blueprints for Pluton, so you know my interest is purely academic." Cherry asked sweetly whilst batting her eyelashes. "Really? It's not because you want an excuse to spend more time with me?" Robin countered, resting her chin on her hand. "Well, maybe it's a bit of that. I also want to try switching up the teacher and student dynamic for a change." "Please, Nico-sensei?" Cherry said. Robin wouldn't admit it, but she really liked the sound of that. "Only if you properly apply yourself. If you start to get lazy, that's it." Robin spoke sternly. "Yes, Nico-sensei." Cherry giggled. Luffy and Sanji came back from their sparring, Sanji being quite happy that his kicks actually hurt Luffy now. He has a lot of trouble keeping Luffy out of the pantry, so Haki is a game changer for him. "Oh, where did you get cake?" "I want some," Luffy exclaimed, reaching for the coffee cake. "Oh, I made it, you can have some," Cherry said. Bam! Sanji kicked Luffy away. "Like I'll let you hog Cherry-chan's cake all to yourself." Another battle ensued between them, Luffy trying to snatch the coffee cake all for himself while Sanji fought tooth and nail to not lose the opportunity to try Cherry's cooking. When they stopped fighting long enough to look back, they saw their other crewmates enjoying slices of coffee cake for themselves. None remained for either of them. "This is pretty good," Usopp praised. "Somehow it tastes nostalgic," Nami said. "Who could have guessed you were capable of more than destruction?" Serene observed. "So sweet," Chopper spoke happily. "This is super," Frankie exclaimed. "This makes my tongue happy." "Though I don't have a tongue." "Yo ho ho ho," Brook laughed. "It's okay, I guess," Zoro blasphemed. "If you don't like it, give it to me, moss head." Sanji shifted his anger to Zoro, sending a Haki-coated kick his way. Another battle started on the ship, though with different opponents this time. Luffy was just sulking at having missed his chance to eat cake, or to eat anything really. "Hee hee, don't worry, it won't be the last time I make one." Cherry tried to cheer him up with little success. "I've completed the repairs and renovation of Brook's ship. I'm ready to go whenever." Frankie reported. "I've stocked all the food we could, but after the banquet we don't have much. We'll need to catch fish to fill the pantry or we'll be forced to ration." Sanji said. "Let's go," Luffy shouted, suddenly full of energy. Finally their preparations were completed and they were ready to continue their adventure. "Marineford. What terrible timing to start making a ruckus," Fleet Admiral Sengoku said. "Only one man could pull something like this, oof." Garp said. "He's been quiet all this time, over 20 years, why now?" Sengoku grit his teeth. Garp and Sengoku gazed out of the office at the chaos below. Several marine warships were floating up into the air as a flying island ship flew overhead. "Let this serve as a warning to you. Don't get in my way," a voice was broadcasted from the flying island ship. The warships were dropped to their destruction below as the island ship flew away. "Jihahaha. Golden Lion Shiki," Garp and Sengoku said. Garp was inwardly somewhat relieved, though that relief came with guilt as well. He hoped that Shiki would cause enough of a disturbance to delay Ace's execution. Chapter 94, Shiki the Golden Lion. Out at Out at sea once more, the straw hats roped in the sea creatures that Cherry stunned with her lightning attacks to fill their food stores. "This sure is handy. Why didn't you do this before? It would have saved us a lot of trouble," Usopp said. "You're just saying that because you don't want to work. Leave Cherry-chan alone." Sanji reprimanded him. "I didn't do it before because I didn't want to work," Cherry said. Cherry returned to Robin's side to learn about the Poneglyph language. She found it fascinating how complex it was and how much information they could fit in a small area. "You're doing well. Keep it up and I might reward you later," Robin encouraged. "Coo!" The call of a new COO was heard close by and it approached the ship. Nami beckoned it over and paid for the newspaper, complaining about the cost as she always did. As she read the newspaper, her expression turned serious and increasingly concerned. "Nami, what's wrong?" Sanji asked. Nami handed the newspaper to him and looked to the others who were wondering what was on it. "Well, it's a warning that several towns in East Blue have been suddenly destroyed. All the Marines have found were giant rocks amongst the rubble of the buildings," Nami explained as Sanji passed the newspaper to Luffy. "Is that like a meteor or something?" Usopp wondered, looking at the photos of the rocks. The shadow of a large object passed over the ship. Looking up, they all saw what looked like a small flying island with oars and sails. "What the hell is that?" Usopp pointed and shouted. "Looks like a flying ship, Super." Frankie said. "It's flying a pirate flag too," Zoro observed. They watched as it passed them by in the same direction they were headed. "Guys, Luffy, we need to change course 90 degrees to port. A cyclone is forming ahead of us," Nami shouted. "And port is to the left of a ship." Luffy started shouting and waving his arms in an attempt to get the attention of the island ship, as the others went about the business of changing directions. In less than a minute, a tone dial floated down from the island ship, presumably to pass on a message to them as they would not be able to hear Luffy's shouted from up there. Luffy passed the tone dial to Nami, who recorded her warning onto it, then held it aloft, at which point it floated back to the flying island ship. Cherry wasn't interested in the cyclone. She had been engrossed in observing the power that moved the tone dial and the flying island ship. This is clearly the work of a devil fruit, but why does it seem more somehow? Cherry thought to herself. She wanted to study this in greater detail, but she wasn't sure she'd have the opportunity. The Thousand Sunny had already finished changing its heading as the cyclone began to appear in the distance. The flying island ship was late in changing direction, likely because they did not take Nami seriously. It was an understandable doubt to have. After all, the cyclones in the Grand Line were said to be unpredictable. Yet here some random stranger was telling them that she could do just that. Ultimately they managed to get out of the cyclone in time, but only by a thin margin. Cherry's keen hearing picked up the faintest sound of a gunshot. "Bad luck, whoever you are. I can only say you should be more careful on who you choose to follow in your next life." Cherry wished whichever unfortunate bastard that ate that bullet the best. The flying island ship caught up with them again. Then they saw the figure of a person fly down and approach the Thousand Sunny. He was an eccentric-looking fellow with long yellow hair down to where his ankles would be, if he did not have swords where his legs would be. The top of his head was bald with part of a ship's wheel seemingly embedded into it like a mohawk. His sideburns went down to his waist, and he had a fluffy goatee on his chin. His wrinkles and liver spots betrayed his advanced age. He landed on the deck with a clang as the sword prodded the wood, which Frankie was rather annoyed by, though he did not say it. "I am Shiki the Golden Lion, a pirate." "Whose voice was it on the tone dial?" Shiki announced confidently. "This guy is shady as hell." Cherry instantly didn't trust him. He reminded her too much of sect elders who had reached the end of their potential but refused to accept the reality of it. That was me." Nami raised her hand hesitantly. Shiki's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but Cherry caught it. "Ah, so you're after Nami's talent, are you? Oh, and he's a pervert too, of course." "Oh, you have my thanks, baby cakes." Shiki thanked her without a shred of sincerity. "Hey old man, how's that floating?" Luffy asked, pointing at the island ship above them. It's the power of my float fruit. Let me demonstrate." Shiki waked over to a barbell on the ground and tapped it. Then he motioned with his hand, sending the barbell flying into the air before dropping it where Zoro caught it. Cherry was lost in her thoughts as she examined the power to the best of her ability. Why is that part of the inscription different? It was universal in all the devil fruit I've seen before now. Cherry pondered. "Amazing, make me fly too," Luffy rudely demanded. "Jihaha, unfortunately it doesn't work on other living beings. Only myself and inanimate objects," Shiki explained, not seeming to mind Luffy's rudeness. Luffy, Chopper and Usopp were disappointed at this answer. "As a token of appreciation, I'd like to invite you to come to my hideout," Shiki offered. "No, but thanks, we're going to East Blue," Luffy said, completely out of nowhere. What about our adventure?" Usopp asked. "We can always continue later. We can't just leave our hometowns in danger, can we?" Luffy said. The others accepted that pretty easily. "Well, in that case, let me take you to East Blue to repay my debt to you," Shiki announced. "He definitely not going to take us to East Blue," Cherry thought, but she also wanted to keep studying his devil fruit, so she just let it happen without protest. Luffy agreed with enthusiasm, undoubtedly just excited for the ship to fly. Cabernet took them on ride-alongs occasionally for fun, but Luffy liked the novelty of Shiki's way. A couple hours later, they saw several much larger floating islands in the distance, some of which even had bodies of water wrapped around thing with seemingly nothing to hold it in. Even Cherry was awestruck at the sight of them. How does he keep all that matter floating at once? Cherry was almost certain that the difference she isolated in Shiki's devil fruit inscription was responsible somehow for the scale of it. How are you able to affect so much at once? Cherry asked. Shiki considered the question. He decided to keep it simple as it was pointless to go into a long explanation with these people. Well, I've awakened my devil fruit. You'll learn all about that when you reach the new world eventually. Awakened? Cherry muttered. She'd never heard of that before, but she instantly began to think of ways such a thing might be accomplished. She didn't discount the possibility that Shiki was just lying either though. Now then, Shiki said, suddenly rushing to Nami's side and grabbing her. Hey, Luffy exclaimed. Down you go. Shiki motioned downward with his hand, and the Thousand Sunny dropped out beneath their feet. That's what I get for getting lost in thought around a creep like that, I guess. Cherry lamented. Cherry ordered Cabernet to grab as many of the others as she could while she did the same. She didn't bother with Nami as she knew Shiki wanted her navigational skill, so he wouldn't harm her. Robin was able to bloom makeshift wings made of arms, so unfortunately Cherry didn't get to play hero and rescue her. Robin grabbed Serene and Brook. Cabernet saved Zoro and Sanji. Cherry rescued Frankie and Usopp. Luffy caught Chopper and Mary, expanding into a balloon before hitting the ground. They gathered together once they all landed. Now what? Chapter 95, Infiltration. We need to save Nami. Luffy shouted. Yes, of course we do, but we also need information, Cherry said. All we know about his strength is that he awakened his devil fruit, which at the very least greatly expands the influence of his power. We know nothing about his base's defenses, or his subordinate's strength. And we don't even know where to GGO. Usopp added. Actually, I've got this booklet of Viver cards I made to track all of you. Cherry said, pulling it out. That's kinda creepy. Zoro said. Shut up, Mosshead, she obviously did it out of concern for me, for everyone. Sanji shouted. In any case, we can locate Nami whenever we like. We should do some spying and perhaps infiltrate them to learn more. Robin suggested. I'll get to work checking on the ship and doing any necessary repairs. Frankie said, knowing sneaky stuff wasn't his strong suit. Roar. A distant roar of some giant beast was heard within the jungle. What was that? I've never heard an animal like that before. Usopp whispered. I guess we should leave some people with the ship just in case, Cherry said. I'll go with Robin, Serene and Cabernet to check out their base. I want to go too, Luffy exclaimed. Don't worry, Luffy, you'll get your piece of the action. Shiki won't hurt Nami because he wants her navigation skills, and Nami won't do anything stupid to warrant hurting her. Cherry said. We should leave at night to avoid being spotted, Robin said. Right, Cherry agreed. Several giant scorpions came out of the tree line. In the meantime, let's get some lunch. Cherry smiled. After they swiftly dispatched the big beasties, Cherry found them to be quite strange in her investigation of their bodies. Something altered these scorpions to their present state. Do you think you could isolate any foreign substances inside their bodies, Chopper? Cherry asked. Maybe, we shouldn't eat them until we can be sure it's safe to do so. I'll perform some tests. Chopper said, taking blood and tissue samples from each back to his medical room of the ship. His findings showed the presence of some unknown chemical substance, although only in trace amounts. I hope whatever it is, it's on these islands. This might be another reagent I can use for cultivation pills, and a strong one at that. Cherry thought. Day turned to night, so Cherry went with Robin, Serene and Cabernet set out to find their base, or at least where Nami was being kept. Cabernet took her figurehead form and the other three women grabbed on. Cabernet turned off her flames as to not be spotted and increase her speed. Cherry's powerful eyesight easily pierced the darkness to see Shiki's fortress. It was surrounded by a line of unusual trees that released something into the air. Those trees might be poisonous, we should stay clear of them, Cherry said. Perhaps they're for keeping the beasts out? I'll bloom some eyes to see inside, Robin said. She bloomed her eyes anywhere with open windows and described what she saw to them. We'll have to go inside for any further detail, Robin said. The guard is pretty heavy, but that suggests they're weak too. Serene can incapacitate the ones inside, but the guards on the outside are wearing gas masks, so that won't work for them. Cherry summarized. Land us on the roof, Cabernet, Cherry ordered. Cherry used her life sense to detect the people within. She found Shiki and some kind of gorilla amongst the many individuals inside. A lone person was separated from anyone else by a fair distance. Possibly this was Nami. Another person was inside a room filled with plants, perhaps some sort of greenhouse, and what appeared to be a very large duck. Cherry was most interested in this room as it may contain the source of the scorpion's mutation. Okay, Nami might be the individual in this approximate location, Cherry said, drawing a simple map on the roof and pointed to the location. You three go confirm and escape with her. I'm going to check something else out. Receiving their nods, they went separate ways. Cherry went towards the plant room, cutting a quick hole in the glass to enter. Seeing the large amount of one particular flower, she was sure this was what she wanted. "Who are you?" a clown shouted at her. A flash of lightning went through his head and her slumped over, smacking his face into the floor without any chance to retaliate. "Quack!" A large duck seemed to cry out in shock, gaping at Cherry with a wide-open bill. Cherry didn't take any chances and hit the duck with some lightning too, but was surprised that it had no effect whatsoever. "Quack!" The duck seemed to question what she was doing. "Just be quiet, I'm robbing the place." Cherry shushed him and got to work harvesting all the plants. She moved on to the lab that the clown came out of and took all the books that were there after glazing through them. "The flowers are called IQ, and those trees outside are daft green? The tree might be worth looking into as well." Cherry thought aloud. "Quack!" The duck quacked at her as she exited the lab and approached the window. "I'm not taking you with me." Cherry squinted at him. "So don't follow me." Quack! The duck seemed to understand. Cherry jumped out the window and used Jeppo to hop through the air back toward the island the ship was located. The others had already escaped with another person, so they likely already retrieved Nami. Now we just need to do something about Shiki. He'll be able to overtake us whenever he wants, so running away isn't a likely option. Guess I'll have to go all out, Cherry thought. Cherry frowned. The duck was following her even though she told it not to. It had seemed intelligent enough so it knew what it was doing. The question was whether it was an enemy. Cherry decided that if it followed her all the way back, she'd let the others do something about it. But if it stopped following her, she'd assume it was a spy and kill it. The large duck was blissfully unaware that his murder was being plotted, thinking it was quite clever to follow behind silently. Fortunately, he planned to follow her until the end, and averted that untimely demise. Why was he following her? Well, he didn't like the clown and Cherry used lightning, so she must be the same as himself, right? Being an artificial mutant. All that stuff, Cherry? Chopper asked. I found the substance that mutated the animals on these islands, as well as some research materials that might interest you. Cherry said, handing over the book and a portion of the IQ plants for him to play with. It's good to see that you're fine, Nami, Cherry said. Thank you for the prompt rescue. Now we need to get out of here. Nami replied. I don't wanna. Luffy said. Don't be stupid, Luffy. We shouldn't fight if we don't have to, Usopp pleaded. No, he's right. We won't be able to escape from Shiki easily. We'll have to fight him. Nami said. According to these research records, a tree called Daft Green keeps the mutated animals away. They use them to form a defensive barrier to keep them out. Chopper explained with his nose in a book. There's something else you haven't considered, Robin said, getting everyone's attention. Amongst the ruins of the destroyed towns in East Blue, giant boulders were found. Who do you know can lift giant boulders into the air and drop them again? Dawning realization appeared on their faces, whilst Cherry nodded. Now everyone was on the same page. Shiki had to go down. Chapter 96 Traveling Doctors. Shiki was pretty adamant about me joining his crew. I think he'll be looking for me as soon as he realizes I have escaped. Nami said. I think he's arrogant enough to come alone once he does. So we should ambush him, huh? I can construct some traps, send some projectiles flying at him. It'll be hard to hit a flying target, but we can restrict his movements that way for a time. Frankie suggested. I can help with that. With my marksmanship we can fire at the best timing, Usopp said. I'll be able to restrict his limbs for a moment. Robin added. Sounds like we're shaping up for a decent ambush. Overconfident old fogies make the easiest targets. Sometimes they'll walk right into a trap even if they know there's a trap. Cherry nodded with approval. Quack. The large duck nodded as well. He said he agrees too. Chopper translated. Where did he come from? They shouted belatedly. He followed me here. Cherry spoke, then turned to the duck. You're with us until the end now. If you try to run away you'll be treated as a spy and traitor and thus be summarily executed. Quack? The duck looked shocked. Cabernet leaned down to Chopper and whispered a question. What did he say? He said, Quack, Chopper answered. Oh. Cabernet felt a bit silly. Okay, Luffy, I had an idea for a combo move, so let's go practice while the others iron out the plan. Cherry said, dragging him along. A combo move? Luffy exclaimed with shining eyes. As for the reason she was bothering with combo moves when she could just face Shiki directly? Because it would be fun, that's why. You can't just live your life doing things in the most efficient manner all the time. After a while they finished practicing and returned to the others. Luffy had a giant smile on his face and couldn't stop chuckling to himself because he was so excited. So did you get the details worked out? Cherry asked. Yeah, we just need a place to set up the ambush. It has to be close by to where we'll send out the bait, but not so close that they can discover us during construction. Frankie said. So we'll have to do some scouting. Cabernet and I will go, we'll be the most mobile. Cherry said. Quack, the duck said. No, you can't come. You're too noisy and you glow like a giant lightning bug. Cherry said. Quack. He was disappointed because he knew it was true. Cherry and Cabernet went flying around the islands at tremendous speeds. They were looking for something like a separate base of operations that could contact the main base, but not heavily manned. Instead, what they found was a village surrounded by the daft green trees. Getting closer, they saw the residents were middle-aged or older women and children with feathered arms. Cabernet set them down near a house on the edge of the village. Cherry scanned the village with her life sense. Aside from the regular people living here, she discovered large dendenmushi that she suspected were some sort of surveillance system. Cherry approached the house and knocked on the door. It was still somewhat dark out, but the first light of dawn was cresting over the horizon, so it shouldn't be too early in the morning for village folk. They were already awake at least. A red-haired woman answered the door with a confused look, with a young girl peering around from behind her. "Hello? Who are you?" she questioned. "I'm a visitor to the islands here, madam. You might call me a gentlewoman explorer. I happen to notice those trees over yonder seem to release a substance into the air, and wish to inquire as to whether it was toxic?" Cherry put on a very fake posh accent. "Oh yes, the daft green trees are quite toxic, you should stay away from them," she answered, despite being perplexed by the situation. I see. Is there anyone in this village who has had the misfortune to be poisoned by the daft green trees?" Cherry asked, keeping up the accent. "Well," she hesitated, "my mother has caught the illness, as have a number of others in the village. If you don't mind, may I examine her? Perhaps I can assist, or if not, then my companion who is much more versed in the medical arts may be able to?" Cherry asked. The woman thought for a few moments but decided to let her inside. She figured if she meant any harm, she did not need to be deceptive about it with mere villagers. The older woman was sat up in her bed, having overheard the conversation. "I hope I haven't disturbed your rest. Would you mind if I examined you?" Cherry made sure she had the permission of the patient before beginning. Cherry faked an examination while getting a better idea of the workings of the woman's body. Sure enough, she found signs of the IQ plant as well as another foreign substance that matched with daft green. Interesting. I think I can do something for this," Cherry said. "Oh, you have a way as well?" "Normally, only the IQ plant can cure daft green, but it's so rare." The younger woman said. "Yes, see here?" Cherry held out her hand where a dark green ball sat on her palm. "What is it?" the older woman asked. "Mother, the spots on your face are gone?" The younger woman said. "That's right. I took it all out when you weren't paying attention, ho 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 ho." Cherry was having a lot of fun with this persona. The two women could only gawk with wonder at her. The little girl hadn't noticed what was going on as Cabernet was juggling her. "Can you do this for the others in the village too?" the younger woman asked. "Naturally, but first I'll need to bring my companions here. Would you mind accommodating us?" Cherry asked. "Well, I don't mind, but Shiki has surveillance dendenmushi in the village. I don't know what he or his men will do to you." The women were worried quite a bit over this. "Not to worry, we can handle ourselves. If anyone comes asking about us, just rat us out. In fact, I insist that you do so if that comes to pass. Understand?" Cherry spoke adamantly. The two women didn't understand why she would want that and still felt guilty about doing such a thing to someone who had helped them. However, the frightening look in her eyes left no room for them to refuse, so they simply nodded their heads. "Great, if you'd be so kind as to quietly spread the word that doctors have arrived that can treat daft green poisoning and get the information of where to go back to me, that would be fantastic. I'll return shortly with my companions, and we'll make quick work of it, before this Shiki fellow can do anything about us." Cherry ranted whilst walking outside, dragging Cabernet along with her. They flew back to the others and filled them in on what they found. "We can set up the ambush a ways away from the village. Cabernet, Chopper, Nami and I will go into the village and make a big show of our charitable work as a cover for the fact that we're bait. Sound good?" Cherry said, receiving nods of agreement. The hard part would be moving the Thousand Sunny without getting seen, so that would need to be done the following night. The traps would take a while to set up anyways. The group of 4 returned to the village, keeping to cover to avoid being seen by the dendenmushi. "I want to check up on the woman you treated first to make sure she's doing well," Chopper said. Cherry didn't take offense from this. She knew he was just being cautious for the patient's sake. Whilst Chopper checked on the older woman, the younger woman told Cherry about the people who were suffering from daft green poisoning, as well as a few others with different ailments. Cherry plotted their route carefully, as they needed to avoid being caught until the preparations were complete. They visited the people who were suffering the worst on the first day before returning to the others for the day. Tomorrow they would finish up, then Nami would accidentally get seen by the dendenmushi patrols. Hopefully Shiki would take the bait and be stupid enough to come alone. Chapter 97, Lion Hunt. The traps had been set up. Mostly they were made up of catapults and giant slingshots with a variety of different ammunitions. Cherry also included a few surprises of her own. Everything had been hooked up to a complex system of ropes and pulleys that Usopp could use to launch things at Shiki in the air. Now is the time to cast the lure and hook themselves a big fish. The surveillance dendenmushi is coming this way. Remember to make it look like an accident hat you were discovered. Cherry whispered to Nami. I know already, stop reminding me, Nami whispered back. Nami stepped out from between two houses and turned to see the large snail gazing at her. She put on a very believable shocked face before running off in the direction of their ambush, inside the observation room of Shiki's main base. Why haven't you found her yet? What the hell is taking so long? Shiki complained loudly. Captain, we don't have surveillance over the entirety of Merveille and we only have so many men to go out searching for her. It's going to take some time. Spoke a man at a console, though it was clear how nervous and afraid he was. I don't care, just find her. Despite his outward anger, he would not punish subordinates who hadn't actually messed up. Well, there was the fellow that was operating their weather prediction technology up until a few days ago, but he had advised against following Nami's advice. Captain, one of the surveillance dendenmushi in the village spotted the woman. She ran away towards the wilderness to the south of the village. Another subordinate reported loudly. The tense atmosphere relaxed considerably with those words. Jiahahaha, I knew you could do it. I'll be going personally right away, Shiki said, in a much better mood now that he knew where his new navigator was hiding. He went to the nearest window and flew outside towards the village from where he'd begin his search. The sun was beginning to set and the sky grew darker. The perfect time to pull of this ambush, as Shiki would still be easy enough to see if he flew, while the darkness would obscure their contraptions in the trees. Here he comes. Are you ready, Luffy? Cherry asked. Luffy assented. He immediately entered into gear second and grabbed two thick tree trunks, preparing to launch himself. Cherry drew her sword and stabbed it into his back, only there was no blood as the blade transformed into lightning and slipped into his body. Luffy's hair stood on end and sparks danced across his body. Shiki came within range and Luffy fired himself at the old pirate faster than he'd ever moved before. Shiki sensed the attack, but Luffy's speed was too absurd to respond to without warning. Luffy slammed a lightning-charged jet bazooka in Shiki's back, sending him flying into the strike zone of the traps. What the heel was the only thing Shiki could shout before a multitude of nets, explosive balls, firebombs and harpoons were fired at him from all directions, leaving no room for escape. Shiki outstretched his hands and the projectiles all stopped just before reaching him. Did you think you could beat me with petty trickery such as this? Everything in Merveille is under my control. Shiki shouted, both amused and enraged at the same time. Cherry snapped her fingers. Boom! An enormous cloud of green enveloped him instantly. It was so dense that nothing could be seen within. A couple of seconds later the cloud was forced away from Shiki, and he could be seen hacking and coughing as he clutched his throat. Daft Green? He spoke in a hoarse voice filled with panic. He quickly reached into clothes for the antidote he always carried with him. Bam! Luffy took the opportunity that Shiki's lapse of awareness had created to blast him with a giant lightning-coated fist, shattering the antidote in the process. Damn you! Shiki grit his teeth. His skin was already showing the first signs of daft green poisoning. Cherry had packed it in pretty densely. His hair was burned and streaks of blackened skin could be seen on his arms and face. Shiki no longer looked down on these youngsters. As much as it hurt his pride, he was now taking this seriously. I'll show you that a man who fought Roger isn't to be toyed with. Shiki immediately went on the offensive. He sensed Zoro being kicked into the air by Sanji and swung his sword legs in his direction. Zoro was forced to counter the powerful slashes with his own, wasting his opportunity to attack. Shiki quickly oved his hands and formed giant earthen lions from the terrain. With them he tried to swallow up all the people he could sense in the vicinity. Luffy blasted through his with a giant stomp, but the others were in a bit of a predicament. Zoro and Sanji were forced to work together to break through theirs, much to their chagrin. The others present, which was Usopp and Frankie, had to be rescued by Cherry as she ripped through the remaining lions with a mixture of Hushoken and Rokushiki. Shiki saw this wasn't going well for him. His irrational hatred of East Blue grew with every moment that passed. First Goldie Roger humiliated him, now a bunch of upstarts from East Blue were doing the same. Shiki shot his hands down with a mad look in his eyes. The entire floating island dropped out of the sky, whilst he flew upwards at the same time to put distance between them. He directed his palms toward another of the floating island, and moved it over to be directly above and moved out of the way. He strained with all his power to bring the first island to a stop and start to rise with increasing speed as the second island came hurtling down towards it. Cherry couldn't let that continue, so she quickly bounced through the air at him. Shiki couldn't respond properly as he was already losing function in his limbs from the daft green poisoning. Cherry pummeled him with fists and feet. Each strike contained vicious vibrating energy that tore through his body. When the other islands started to fall out of the air, Cherry realized Shiki had already been beaten into unconsciousness. Below she saw Cabernet in ship form flying away from the lower island with the villagers, all safe and sound. It was good she prepared for the possibility the islands would fall. The Thousand Sunnies Kuda burst charged up and launched itself away from the island so as not to be crushed as well. Cherry quickly moved to the ship to make sure everyone was accounted for. From the island where Shiki's fortress was located, she saw the strangest sight. A large number of people flapping their arms and actually flying with them. They looked much the same as the villagers. As for Shiki's men, well, the islands ought to slow down a bit when they hit the ocean, right? They should be tough enough to endure if they were on Shiki's crew. Is everyone all right? Cherry asked as she landed. It seemed that everyone was accounted for, even the duck. Seeing everyone was accounted for and in good shape, she was satisfied. She walked over to Robin and snuggled up with her, to which Robin responded by patting her head. What happened to Shiki? Nami asked. I don't know, but guys like him are like cockroaches. He probably won't die. From the looks of things, he'll get caught by the Marines though. Cherry said, pointing to the distance where several Marine warships were lying in wait. The islands landed in the ocean and surprisingly didn't sink. Once the villagers were situated, the Straw Hats quickly fled before the Marines could catch them. Are you sure you don't want to come, Billy? Chopper asked the duck. Quack. He quacked decisively and took flight. He'd discovered that Cherry wasn't really like him, and she was also really scary, so he had decided to stay at Mervale. Now we can finally get back on track, Cherry thought, whilst leaning her head on Robin's shoulder. I just need to convince Luffy to go save Ace somehow. Why does he have to be so stubborn about the strangest thing? Chapter 98, halfway. The time spent sailing was very fruitful for both Cherry and Chopper's research. Cherry was able to create a new cultivation pill using the IQ plant and daft green trees that was many times more potent than the previous ones. This would greatly reduce the time to reach the next cultivation realm. She anticipated she could do so in less than a year, perhaps as quickly as 6 months. As for Chopper, with Cherry's assistance he was able to create a much more powerful version of his rumble balls using the IQ plant. He had refused to even be in the same room as the daft green material as its smell was vile within his nose, so Cherry only worked with it in an airtight room. Chopper tested his new rumble ball with much excitement to see what new changes it would bring him. However, no new changes came. Instead he transformed into a massive reindeer-human hybrid monster. Ah, I've messed up again. Now I'll go berserk and hurt everyone. Run away everyone, it's dangerous to be around me. Chopper's voice thundered in a much deeper tone. Everyone stared at him for several awkward moments as he hid behind his big hands. Huh? Chopper peeked out from his hands and found that he had not in fact lost control and attacked his friends. Oh, I'm not losing control? Chopper's excitement was reaching new heights now as he realized how useful his new rumble ball would be. I see, so your new Ultra Rumble Ball allows for a temporary awakening of your devil fruit. Cherry commented aloud. Awakening? Chopper repeated. Now that he was able to feel out the changes in his body with a clear mind, he did feel like something had been unlocked within himself. After 5 minutes, 2 minutes longer than his normal Rumble Ball, he finally changed back. He was left in a nearly paralyzed state once the effect completely dissipated. This didn't bring down the reindeer doctor's mood though, as he couldn't stop giggling gleefully. A few weeks of sailing later, the Thousand Sunny and the Straw Hats could finally see the massive red wall of rock and a sheer cliff face. The others gazed at it with a mixture of nostalgia and joy that the journey was already half finished. Cherry had different thoughts. The so-called celestial dragons live somewhere up there in their so-called Holy Land, I bet they had some good stuff that you can't find anywhere else. Maybe I'll pay a visit sometime, so look forward to it. Hey, Cherry smiled evilly. Your villainous face is showing again, Robin said, kissing her on the cheek. Frankie prepared his shark submarine so that a few of them could see if they can find any sign of where Fishman Island was. Luffy, Brooke and Robin volunteered to go down. Wait, why are the devil fruit users volunteering to descend into the depths of the ocean? Cherry questioned reasonably. Because I'm the captain, Luffy said confidently. Because I won't drown without any lungs? Brooke answered in a way that revealed he had only thought up that excuse in that moment. I like to live dangerously. Robin smiled. Cherry couldn't argue with that smile. Fine, whatever. Brooke, if Robin drowns then I'll eat Laboon, Cherry warned, only half jokingly. Eh? Leave Laboon alone, boil my bones into broth instead. Brooke panicked and bartered. Down they went. Meanwhile, Sanji served a new dessert he came up with, inspired by thriller bark. Cherry took a bite after removing the ashy smell from Sanji's cigarettes. Delicious. The three went down the lowest depth the submarine could handle, about 5 kilometers, but not only was there no sign of Fishman Island, there was no sign of the sea floor at all. Which was pretty strange given how close they were to the red line. You'd think the seafloor would rise up as it got closer to land. What are we going to do? We're stuck just like we were with Sky Island. Nami lamented. Fishman Island is visited with much greater frequency than Sky Island though, so there must be a commonly known method to go there. Cherry surmised. The submarine came back up to the surface having had to escape from a sea king. It's pointless, we couldn't see anything down there. Luffy complained. Brooke was just excited at riding a submarine for the first time. If we had gone any deeper the pressure would have crushed us into a tuna can. Robin commented. I wished I'd asked Lola about how to get down there. Nami regretted. Sploosh. A giant rabbit-like sea king came out of the water and beset them. It followed us. Luffy shouted. Luffy slammed a fist into its gut, sending it reeling back as it coughed something up onto the deck of the Thousand Sunny and fell back into the ocean. The smaller projectile landed on Sanji's face, whilst the large one landed in Cabernet's arms in a Princess Carrie fashion. The smaller one was a starfish wearing a hat and for some reason had a face. The larger one was a mermaid with short green hair and a pink fishtail. "Oh, thank you for catching me. Ah, why are you on fire?" the mermaid exclaimed. "It's fine, it doesn't hurt," Cabernet said with a sweet smile. "Oh, is that so?" The mermaid calmed down instantly. She turned to the rest of the crew and started screaming in surprise again. This happened a few times before she finally calmed down for good. She thanked them for saving her from the Sea King, as she was often eaten by Sea Kings, and introduced herself as Kami. The starfish is apparently a fashion designer and Kami's pet. His name was Papag. Cherry was much more interested in the talking starfish than the mermaid. "I didn't know there were talking starfish. Are there a lot of your kind?" Cherry asked him. "Nope, it's just me. I believed that I was human and didn't learn the truth until I had already learned to speak." Papag spoke proudly. "Do you mind if I dissect you? Starfish regrow their limbs, right?" Cherry asked politely. She really wanted to know what made this starfish different from other starfish. There was no signs of it being the work of a devil fruit, nor of being a cyborg like Frankie. "What? Of course not. It's all to do with my willpower anyways, not my body." Papag was terrified by her hungry eyes. "Tisk, whatever, it's your loss." Cherry walked away from him, leaving him confused about what he could have possibly lost by refusing to be dissected. "I can get you guys some takoyaki, I just need to call Hatchin," Kami said, taking out a dendenmushi and calling someone. A voice picked up the phone, but apparently it wasn't Hatchin, but a slaver of some sort who teamed up with another slaver group to catch the octopus fishman and sell him. Cherry furrowed her brow at that. She didn't like slavers. They dared her to come rescue him at a particular location near a place called Sabaody Archipelago. When the call ended, Nami muttered about the name and voice of Hatchin being familiar. "Well, you'd remember if you'd met an octopus fishman before, right? Unless you've met a whole bunch of them," Cherry said to her. "Ah," Nami felt stupid for not putting two and two together. "Hatchin is Hachi, the octopus fishman in Arlong's crew." Chapter 99, Flying Fish Riders. You know Hatchin? Are you friends?" Kami asked with a curious smile and a tilt of the head. "Ah well, Nami felt awkward now. "We're not friends. When Hachi was in Arlong's crew, he helped him hurt a lot of people I care about." "What?" Kami was becoming despondent. "So you won't help him?" "No, we won't help that guy," Zoro spoke plainly. "All right. I'll just have to save him by myself." Kami slapped her face and hopped over to the edge of the ship and jumped overboard. Chomp. Then a sea king swallowed her whole before she hit the water. "Ah, she got eaten again," Hay shouted. After a quick rescue operation, Kami was back on the deck of the ship in a depressed mood. "I'm useless. I can't even swim in the ocean, let alone save Hatchin," Kami said with tears threatening the edges of her eyes. "I guess there's nothing for it, we'll save Hachi. At least he never personally harmed anyone in my hometown, even if he supported Arlong." Nami sighed. Kami leapt onto Nami with a hug, and streams of tears sprayed out of her eyes like water hoses. "Thank you." Since Nami agreed, no one else had any objections to saving Hachi from the slavers. Kami called out to the ocean and spoke with a school of fish who came to the surface. "They'll lead halfway to the Flying Fish Riders base. They won't go any further though because they're scary." Kami explained. "Oh, mermaids can talk to fish? Sort of like how Chopper can talk to land animals, though I suppose he is a land animal." "Yo ho ho ho," Brooke said. They followed the fish for a while, but suddenly the fish scattered. Soon the reason became apparent when they saw a few men riding some sort of flying fish. "It seems they intend to do hit-and-run tactics to attack us," Cherry observed. "Cabernet, teach them who rules the SS Kai." A sudden gust of wind battered against them, and Cabernet had vanished. Splash splash splash. The three flying fish riders plunged into the ocean. The flying fish themselves were unharmed and ran away back to where they came, abandoning their riders. The crew fished the unconscious riders out of the ocean. Cabernet was already back on the ship. Once they were tied up, Cherry taps each one on the forehead in succession. They slowly came to consciousness and groggily looked around. "Wake up, sunshine." Cherry lightly slapped the cheek of the one who had had the dendenmushi. The poor man was awfully confused as he tried to speak through his gag. One moment he was about to capture some pirates for a sweet payday, and the next he was the one who was caught. "Purururu." The dendenmushi rang. Cherry answered it. "Come back to base. Let the straw hats come to us." A voice said through the dendenmushi. "We're coming all right, but your boys will be staying with us." Cherry answered. "Who is this?" the voice asked. "Harpin D. Cherry along with the Straw Hat Pirates. You'll give us the octopus fishmen and we'll let your boys live, how does that sound?" Cherry asked nonchalantly. "What? Well, if you kill them I'll just kill the fishmen," The voice spoke without much confidence. Okay then, if that's how you want to do it. Cherry hung up the receiver. Ah, he's going to kill Hahachin? Ami panicked instantly. Pururu. Cherry answered it. Don't do it, I won't kill the fishman, I promise. The man screamed through the denden mushi. Oh, you changed your mind? Alright, let's do the exchange instead then. Cherry said calmly. Fine, just hurry up, I don't have all day. The man on the other end hung up this time. Kami let out a deep breath in relief. They pressed onwards, and soon saw their destination on the horizon. It was a stone dock built in a shallow portion of the ocean in a crescent moon shape with a number of wooden buildings with straw roofs. As they got closer, a cage could be seen suspended over the water, containing the ink-soaked figure of Hachi. No one else could be seen on the structure. There are 3 fishmen in the water, and a few dozen more people riding those flying fish deeper down. There's one person hiding amongst the buildings with a large animal as well. Cherry naturally found them all easily. I'm over here, Kami, don't worry, I'm okay, Hachi said. Hachin, why are you all black, did you get burned? Kami exclaimed. Maybe they were roasting him for lunch, Robin commented to Kami's increasing horror. No, this eyes, never mind that. This is a trap, you have to get away from here. Hachi warned. No, I'm going to save you. Kami tried to jump into the water but was caught by Cabernet. They're waiting in the water, remember Kami-chin? Cabernet explained patiently. Ah, I forgot. Kami stuck her tongue out and tapped her head with her knuckles. A warbling sound of flying sword slashes rang out from Cherry towards Hachi's cage. Ah, Hachi saw his whole life flash before his eyes. The cage and the ropes binding Hachi was cut away without leaving a scratch on him, and he plopped into the water free from his bindings. Cherry saw that the ambushers below started to move, so she and Cabernet threw their 3 hostages in different directions into the ocean. Still bound by ropes and gags, they naturally wouldn't be able to swim. As expected, a few of the flying fish riders broke off from the main group to save their comrades whilst the rest rushed upwards to fight. The 3 fishmen were quickly taken care of by Hachi, then the battle started in earnest. It was very chaotic as there were quite a few of the flying fish riders, but they didn't stand a chance against these battle-hardened pirates. At some point Luffy fell from high in the air into the building with the lone man and animal. He came running back out with the man riding the animal on his tail. The flying fish riders' leader, Iron Mask Duval, started to rant about getting his long-awaited revenge against Sanji. But annoyingly didn't elaborate on how Sanji had wronged him. Luffy eventually got fed up with it and kicked his helmet off, revealing his face. Shock and surprise washed over the straw hats. His face looked just like the terrible artist's rendition of Sanji's face on his wanted poster. Now it all made sense, he'd been falsely attributed to Sanji's crimes. Wow, Sanji, why didn't you tell me you had an identical twin brother? Cherry asked, keeping a straight face. Gah! Her words pierced into him like 1,000 swords. Immediately he jumped into action, kicking Duval across the face. Did you even consider all the easy ways to change your appearance? Like a different hairstyle? Sanji shouted, annoyed. Oh yeah, I guess I could have. Duval was enlightened, but he didn't care. He just wanted revenge. The battle raged on once more. Frankie unveiled another weapon of the Thousand Sunny, the Gaon cannon that was hidden in the figurehead's mouth, which shattered the buildings in front of the ship and knocked out many of the flying fish riders. Sanji got caught in an iron net, but he tore the net apart with a hockey-coated kick. Then he finished off the battle by kicking Duval in the face repeatedly and at a progressively faster rate. Finally Duval collapsed the ground unconscious. They all got back on the ship once everything calmed down and followed Kami's directions to reach the ScarletArboretum archipelago, where they would be able to start the descent to Fishman Island. Chapter 100, Celestial Dragon. Hachi made takoyaki for the crew as a thank you for saving Kami, Papag and himself. Cherry was hesitant to try it, as it conjured images of tentacled horrors she had witnessed in her last life, none of which were even remotely appetizing. Once she relented, she found that it was actually quite nice though. Their meal was interrupted when the flying fish riders caught up to them. Cherry seriously considered teaching them a more permanent lesson before they revealed that their intentions were not bad, but rather that Duval wanted to thank Sanji for making him handsome, thus turning his life's prospects around for the better. The newly named Rosy Life Riders went on their merry way after promising to repay their debt in some way in the future. While they were eating, the method by which one would go to Fishman Island was explained to them. The ScarletArboretum archipelago apparently produced a unique kind of resin that formed large floating bubbles. This resin could be applied to a ship in a particular way to protect it from the pressure of the water in the ocean's depths, as well as keep in air for its crew to breathe. I presume we need to hire someone to do this resin coating method then? Cherry asked. Right, not to worry though, I know of someone who is both very good at his craft and very trustworthy. Hachi said. Totally not setting us up for a watery grave, right? Cherry asked. No, I wouldn't do that to anyone, certainly not people who have saved my life. Hachi denied adamantly, much to Cherry's amusement. Soon they arrived at the Sabaody archipelago, which was in actuality a cluster of enormous mangrove trees. There was no actual land, rather the people here lived on top of the roots of the trees. After inspecting the soapy bubbles that formed before their very eyes, they formed into groups. Hachi, Cherry, Luffy, Nami, Chopper, Brook, Robin, Cammy, and Papag were in the group to go find the resin coating expert for the Thousand Sunny. Zoro tried to go off on his own, saying he couldn't possibly lose his way when the trees were marked with numbers. Cherry still insisted that Cabernet go with him, as she could just directly drag Zoro to Cherry if they got lost. The remaining people, namely Sanji, Usopp, Serene, Frankie and Mary, stayed on the ship to guard it and the treasure on board. Now I need to warn you guys about something important, Hachi explained. If we see any world nobles, also called celestial dragons, then you mustn't go against them. It's better if you try not to stand out in any way, no matter what. Sure, whatever, Luffy replied nonchalantly, only half paying attention. Cherry patted Hachi on the shoulder. You're going to have to be more specific. Those of us with functioning brains can infer the danger you're warning us about, but goofballs like Luffy need it spelled out for them. Otherwise he might just do whatever he feels in the moment. Oh right. Hachi couldn't say he knew Luffy super well, but he knew what Cherry was saying was absolutely the case just based on what little he knew about him. If you were to harm a world noble in any way, an admiral from Marine headquarters would be sent directly here to deal with you. Hachi explained. Like Aokiji? This time the message got through to Luffy's pea-brain properly. They visited a vendor that rented and sold a contraption that combined with the bubbles to form a vehicle of sorts. They rented a couple of personal-sized ones and a larger one. Hachi later explained that buying one was a scam, as the bubbles could only exist in the unique atmosphere of the Sabaody archipelago or Fishman Island. Nami, Robin and Cherry split from the others to go to a shopping mall. Although Cherry had no interest whatsoever in shopping, she wouldn't miss a chance to spend time with Robin. She would soon regret that decision. Be careful and stay low-key guys, I can sense some really strong people around here, so don't cause any trouble. Cherry warned. Inside the shopping mall, Robin and Nami suddenly picked Cherry up by the arms and quickly brought her to an inexpensive-looking boutique. A feeling of tremendous dread overcame her. I've changed my mind, I want to go have a look at the resin coating guy instead. Cherry squirmed, but Robin only bloomed a multitude of arms to restrain her further. Half an hour later Cherry was exhausted. She had been toyed with like a dress-up doll, and the worst part? She looked good in everything. Such is the curse of being a world-shaking beauty. Cherry was currently wearing a frilly black dress with pink highlights with a matching fancy hat. Thank you, it was very fun dressing you up. Robin embraced her. Well, as long as you're happy, Cherry grumbled. Zoro was wandering randomly around the archipelago, whilst Cabernet followed him around like a puppy. Cabernet had found a way to convert her wings into sail fabric so that they looked like a giant scarf wrapped around her, and she had turned off her flames. It wouldn't prevent anyone from recognizing her, but it would at least make a bit harder. Mainly it was to limit the possibility that a world noble would see her unique traits and try to enslave her. Some sort of commotion was happening up ahead, Cabernet observed with curiosity, whilst Zoro didn't seem to even notice anything was happening. Bang. A gunshot was heard followed by a woman's scream. Cabernet saw that an exceptionally ugly man wearing a glass fishbowl on his head had shot a man. You murderer, how could you? Someone please help him. The woman cried out, but when the ugly man turned to her she clapped her hands over her mouth. Why is no one doing anything? Is this one of the world nobles? He doesn't seem to be very noble though, nor does he look like a dragon, Cabernet thought with her brow furrowed. There were some pirates with 100 million plus bounties present as well. Is that pirate hunter Zoro and Bloodwine Cabernet? I heard she blew up a whole city in Alabasta. Asked a pirate behind a man with instruments integrated into his body. They're just casually walking down the street, do they not know anything? Wondered a gangster-looking man. Shit, look at her face, she's going to kill the celestial dragon. A pink-haired woman muttered with growing horror. Of course that was just how Cabernet looked most of the time. As Zoro kept walking towards the world noble absent-mindedly, Cabernet suddenly veered into the crowd of pirate and blended in with them. Racked with indecision, she decided to just let Zoro decide what to do, though she didn't realize how bad that idea was. The pirates present let out a sigh of relief seeing the woman with a 275 million berry bounty back out. They still had to do some about Zoro though. When the world noble noticed Zoro walking towards him, he panicked and fired his gun at Zoro, which was easily dodged. As Zoro went in for the attack, he was tackled by a pink-haired little girl who put on an act that he'd been shot and killed. The world noble was as stupid as he was ugly, so he easily believed the act and lost interest. He wandered off with his new bride and everyone finally relaxed. Why'd you stop me? Zoro complained. What do you mean? You nearly got us all killed. Did you want an admiral to come down on top of our heads? The pink-haired woman reprimanded him. And you, Bloodwine Cabernet, why in the world didn't you stop him yourself? Cabernet looked down sheepishly at the rebuke. She spoke softly. I'm sorry. The pirates present felt their hearts quake in their chests. How can she seem so cute? Ultimately, the worst-case scenario was avoided, so the pirates went their separate ways. Zorro and Cabernet went to find a doctor for the man who had been shot. Chapter 101, Mermaid Rescue. As Robin, Nami and Cherry were chatting while heading back to the ship, they suddenly heard someone calling their names. They looked over and saw Frankie riding with a few of the Rosy Life Riders with their flying fish. "Robin, scary girl, greedy girl, hurry and get on one of the flying fish, the mermaid has been kidnapped," Frankie shouted, whilst posing for some reason. Instantly, Cherry scanned over the entire Sabadi archipelago by pushing her life sense to the limit. Finding a human amongst other humans was hard, but a mermaid would stand out like a sore thumb. Her range was able to cover the entire archipelago as well, due to the fact that even the ground she stood on contained vital energy. "What is on the grove at the edge of the archipelago in that direction?" Cherry asked one of the fish riders whilst pointing in the direction where she found Kami. "Huh? Oh well, that would probably be the largest slave auction house here, on Grove 1? As he spoke, he realized for himself that that was the most likely place to find a mermaid being sold. Cherry gave a quick hoo to Robin, before rushing towards Kami at her top speed. There wasn't a great risk in Kami being seriously harmed or killed, as she was considered a valuable commodity in the slave trade. However, if one of the world nobles caught sight of her and decided they wanted her, and why wouldn't they, then that would complicate the rescue attempt by a great deal. It didn't take long at all for Cherry to reach the location Kami was kept at. Rather than go through the trouble of forcing her way inside, she decided stealth was the more appropriate avenue of infiltration. She burrowed herself into the roots of the mangrove tree, and snuck under the room where Kami was held prisoner. An older man was relaxing in the holding cells for the slaves when he sensed a presence digging underneath the building with his hockey. He had shoulder-length white hair and a short bear on his chin. He wore glasses and had a scar over his right eye. He was pretty amused by the originality of it. He'd heard of a number of attempts to free a slave, but they'd never tried digging through the mangrove roots before. Of course, the mangrove roots were not only quite hard, but also slick from the resin they produce, so it was natural no one would try it. The floor inside the cell opened up, much to the surprise of the would-be slaves, except the old man, of course. A young woman in a fancy dress and hat climbed out of the hole. She waved her hands and all the dirt and resin stuck to her simply flung off of her, making a circle on the floor around her. Many of those present recognized her quickly. She was the highest bounty on the most infamous rookie pirate crew in recent history after all. When Kami saw her, she almost shouted her name in joy and relief, but the old man clasped a hand over her mouth to stop her. "Don't shout, you'll draw attention to us," he whispered softly. "Ah, sorry." Kami realized her mistake and tried to convey her message of gratitude and hope to Cherry through her eyes. "You shouldn't waste any time, young lady. The guards will be back very soon to get the first slave for the auction," the old man explained. Cherry looked him over and felt he was familiar somehow. She knew she never met him before. She would have remembered meeting a monster like him. Cherry went over to Kami first and placed her hand on her collar. "You need to get the keys for these collars, they're explosive. If you let all of us escape too, you'll have a better chance to get away yourself," a bearded pirate with a big skull tattooed on his chest said. He seemed to have a decent head on his shoulders even though he was pitifully weak. Cherry briefly analyzed the collar and its explosive mechanism. I think I see how it works. Can't test it on my cute little mermaid first though, can I?" Cherry looked at the bearded pirate who spoke up before. He started to sweat nervously when she smiled at him. His relief was profound when she turned away and went to the old man instead. The guard who was supposed to be keeping an eye on the slaves came back from the bathroom and noticed there was an extra person in the holding cell. Before he could say anything, he fell over unconscious from an invisible power. "Maybe I don't want to be your test subject?" the old man said with a smirk. Cherry squinted her eyes at him. She had witnessed that power before, when Chinjiao had used it on her. She could tell it was a kind of hockey now that she was more experienced, but it didn't seem to fit into the two kinds she was familiar with. Cherry didn't pay any mind to the old man and simply reached out and yanked his collar off in one swift motion. She had cut apart the collar as well as destroyed the detonator for the explosives with her devil fruit. Luckily it wasn't a sea stone collar. "Tisk youngsters these days," he complained, but his smile didn't leave his face. Tossing the pieces aside, she went back to Kami, and did the same for her. She considered whether to bother with the rest, but decided what the bearded man said was true enough. They wouldn't serve as a good distraction. Cherry broke the cage apart at around the same time that the auction was getting started, and thus the guards came to get the first slaves to sell. Immediately a fight broke out between the guards and the prisoners. Although they weren't armed, they did have a giant on their side, so the odds were pretty good for them. Only Cherry, Kami and the old man stayed behind. "What was that hockey, old man? I've seen it before from Don Chinjiao." "I'm Cherry, by the way," Cherry asked as she helped Kami climb onto her back. "That's Conqueror's hockey. Only one amongst millions is able to awaken it, so don't get your hopes up." Call me Rayleigh explained briefly. Despite saying that, he felt it was more likely she'd be able to obtain it than not at some point. Cherry went to the wall adjacent and Simple pushed on it, causing a small section to fall outwards. You coming, old man? Cherry asked. No, I think I'll take the chance to steal a bit of gambling money, Rayleigh replied. Cherry swiftly disappeared through the hole in the wall. I've become quite shy in my old age, haven't I? Rayleigh spoke under his breath and chuckled. The giant collapsed backwards. It seemed that the auctioneers had some firepower stowed away just in case they lost control of a giant. Once the giant fell, the others went down swiftly and everyone was promptly recollared. Damn it, where's the mermaid? When did this hole get here? The auctioneer was furious at having lost his big prize. Celestial dragons often overpaid for rare slaves like giants and mermaids. Cherry stopped rushing once there was a fair distance between herself and the auction house. Going so fast was tough on Kami, who was only as strong as a normal person. Phew, that was annoying. I can't believe Luffy and the others took their eyes off of you. They know that slavery is a big thing here. Of course there would be people looking to kidnap you. Cherry said, annoyed. It's not their fault. I was the one who wandered off, Kami defended, feeling bad for the whole thing. Don't worry, I'm not angry. Things turned out okay in the end. Cherry said, oh, it's a mermaid. I'm going to get a mermaid. I won't even have to pay for her. An ugly man with a fishbowl on his head almost sang as he did a stupid dance. Chapter 102, Chaos on Saboti Archipelago. Cherry gazed at the buffoon, completely flabbergasted at the words that came out of his nasty mouth. She glanced at the men who looked like knights in armor and government agents in black suits and sunglasses. None of them were notable enough for her to have paid any attention to, which was why Cherry didn't bother to avoid them. Go get the mermaid for me, the buffoon spat, both figuratively and literally. Yes, St. Charlos? They replied with way too much enthusiasm. Wait. Cherry said, realizing what the title Saint meant in this world. That thing is a celestial dragon? Pfft, bah. She couldn't help but laugh. The wretched creature before her barely passed as human at all, let alone a supposed superior specimen of humanity. Who are you laughing at? St. Charlos shouted in rage. He fired his gaudy golden pistol at her until it ran out of ammunition. Why aren't you dead? I shot you. St. Charlos's disbelief held no fear, only frustration. Shoot me with what? These? Cherry opened her hands, revealing all the bullets that had been fired at her. St. Charlos was much weaker than the average person, so he naturally did not see her hands catching them out of the air. The same was not true of his guards, however. They were still weak by Cherry's standards, but they at least managed to catch sight of the after images of her arms. Nervous sweat beaded all over their bodies, but they held firm with the faith that the woman in front of them would not recklessly attack St. Charlos or his entourage. Cherry flicked the bullets away to somewhere behind St. Charlos, causing him to flinch. Don't you know what will happen to you if you touch me? He shouted incredulously. His men started to move towards Cherry. Outmatched they may be, but they would not have been chosen for these positions if they would abandon their duty because of fear. Why would I touch filth like you? Besides, I don't need to, isn't that right, boys? Cherry's face split into the visage of a smiling demon. You unhand me, slave. St. Charlos squealed. His men turned around to see the slaves no longer had their collars and had taken St. Charlos hostage with his own sword. I won't live as a slave any longer. Bring me a ship or I'll cut his ugly head off his fat neck. The formerly enslaved pirate shouted with crazed eyes. No one doubted he would hesitate to do it either, not even for a second. In fact, they were only afraid he might realize there was no chance for him to escape and kill St. Charles right then and there. Whilst they were busy with their hostage situation, Cherry dashed away with Cammy, who was trembling in fear. "Why, you shouldn't have done that, Cherry. Now they're going to send an admiral," Cammy said, feeling like it was her fault this happened. "I don't know about that. Slave revolts probably happen from time to time, and I didn't lay a finger on the pig or his men. There's a chance they'll resolve it without involving an admiral. That pig seemed as stupid as he is ugly too. He might forget all about me by the time they rescue him," Cherry said. This helped Cammy to calm down, but she still felt bad about it. She cheered up quickly, being the optimist that she was though. Cherry brought Cammy back to the Thousand Sunny at an easy pace that Cammy could handle. Although the others were still frantically looking for her, Cherry felt that Cammy should be somewhere that felt safe. Serene and Mary were there guarding the ship. Serene could handle anyone without observation hockey pretty easily, so the safety wasn't just an illusion. Cherry went back towards the auction house where the others had converged a while ago. She wasn't sure what they were waiting for exactly. They should have just confirmed that Cammy wasn't there and left, right? Cherry walked up to the front door of the auction house. The guards tried to stop her from going in, but she simply brought them down with a few well-placed kicks to the family jewels. She added a little hashoken in there so that they'd hurt until a doctor decided it was better to amputate too. She really didn't like slavers. She opened the door and was greeted by the sound of a gunshot. The celestial pig from earlier had shot Hachi, who was trying to stop Luffy from barging in backstage, and accidentally revealed his other forearms, revealing his identity as a fishman. St. Charles was doing the same stupid dance, and cheering that he'd caught his very own fishman. When Luffy started walking toward St. Charles, Cherry knew what was about to happen. She didn't have the heart to stop him though. A well-placed punch sent St. Charles flying through several set of chairs with a satisfying crunch as the majority of the bones in his body shattered. Cherry could only admire Luffy's restraint with how St. Charles was still alive. A fight broke out amongst World Noble's guards and the Straw Hats as the other auction-goers fled for their lives. Rayleigh came out from backstage and used his hockey to knock out the other guests and guards, leaving only the pirates conscious. Cherry and Rayleigh made eye contact across the auction hall and shared a look of exasperation. "Oh, Hachi, how are you doing?" Rayleigh shouted with a big smile when he saw the octopus fishman. "Seems you've gotten into some trouble. Thank you guys for helping him." "Old man, did you see a mermaid back there? We came to save her," Luffy shouted. That little lady by the entrance already saved her though?" Rayleigh pointed at Cherry. They all turned to see Cherry standing there rubbing her temples. "Idiot, I told you that you should just be patient." Nami whacked Luffy on the head. After setting the other slaves free, Rayleigh said they should talk more later. The building had already been surrounded by the Marines, and it wouldn't be long until an admiral came to the archipelago. "Never thought I'd get to see Dark King Rayleigh in this place," a pirate with spiky red hair said with a cruel smile. "He was Eustace Captain Kidd. That was quite the power he used on us. He even made it look casual." A pirate with tattoos on his arms and a spotted fur cap said, "He was the Surgeon of Death, Trafalgar Law. I'm not going to use that power again here. I don't want to have the government on my tail again. You'll have to deal with the Marines yourselves," Rayleigh said. Eustace Kidd went towards the door first, saying he'll deal with the Marines himself so they can just sit back and relax. A provocation, of course, but it was effective against Trafalgar Law and Luffy. He glanced at Cherry as he passed her, and he felt a chill go up his spine when he met her eyes that seemed to pierce directly into his soul. Fighting through the Marines was like cutting through melted butter with a hot knife with this group of super rookies. A beam of light pierced down, grazing the leg of Eustace Kidd. Cherry looked up and saw what appeared to be Bartholomew Kuma, only it didn't seem to possess either his devil fruit and very little vital energy. The Straw Hat group got away from the fight safely and without pursuit along with Rayleigh. They went back to the bar he usually lived at when he wasn't getting himself into trouble. Chapter 103, Pacifista. Cabernet went to the ship to pick up Cammy, as it would be safer to leave her in someone else's care. Serene and Mary stayed on the Thousand Sunny. Shaggy's rip-off bar, how delightful. Cherry liked the blunt honesty of it. They went inside and got settled down from all the excitement. An admiral would be arriving on the archipelago soon given the distance between this place and Marine headquarters, so they wouldn't be sticking around for too long. "I'm back, Shaggy," Rayleigh called out. "Oh my, what happened to Hawken?" A thin woman with a black bob haircut, presumably Shaggy, asked. Shaggy closed down the bar, not that there were any customers around. "I'll introduce myself properly. I'm Silvers Rayleigh, former right hand of Goldie Roger," Rayleigh said nonchalantly. You were on the Pirate King's ship?" Luffy became an instant fanboy. "You didn't realize that?" Robin asked whilst everyone else felt silly for not putting two and two together before now. "Ah, that's where I recognized you from." Cherry pointed at him. "Old man Qinjiao complained about you all the time." "Oh, you know Qinjiao? I heard a while back that his head was restored and he re-entered the Grand Line. Caused quite the stir." Rayleigh said. "Oh, I'm the one who fixed his head. In exchange I got to learn Hesshoken. Pretty sweet deal, right?" Cherry spoke proudly. "Haha, it is quite the deal. Although Qinjiao was never taken seriously by those at the top, he's not weak by any means." They chatted about how Hachi had saved Rayleigh's life after being shipwrecked long ago, and about how Goldie Roger hadn't been captured, but rather turned himself in as he had a terminal disease. In doing so he was able to set off the next age of piracy with his dying words. They talked about Crocus, the lighthouse keeper at the entrance to the Grand Line, and how he had been the doctor of Roger's ship. One of the people in the plaza that day was Shanks. "You're familiar with him, right? You have his straw hat after all," Rayleigh observed. "You know Shanks?" Luffy asked, stuffing his face with meat. "He and another man named Buggy, who should be a pirate in East Blue, were cabin boys on our ship," Rayleigh said. "Shanks was on the Pirate King's ship?" Luffy exclaimed. They finished up their meal and drinks, then Rayleigh stood up. "Well, I should be getting started on coding your ship. I won't charge since you're Hachi's friends." Rayleigh offered generously. "Rayleigh, I have a question." Robin stopped him. "Just what is the will of D?" "I saw the words Roger left behind in Skypiea carved in the ancient language." "Do you know what happened during the Void Century?" Robin was getting uncharacteristically excited and tense. "Yeah, we found out what happened during the Void Century. However, I think you should slow down and take your time. Travel the world. Maybe we, and Ohara too, were going too fast. Even if I tell you what I learned, there's nothing you can do about it as you are. Who knows? Perhaps you'll come to a different conclusion than we did. Still, I'll tell you if you really want to know," Rayleigh said. Robin sighed. "No, that won't be necessary." Rayleigh smiled. "You'll get there someday. What happened at Ohara sickens me. We were just pirates, not scholars. We didn't really understand those words. We just heard the voice of all things. That was Ale." "Wait, Rayleigh, is the One Piece real?" "Is it really on the last?" Usopp asked on the edge of his seat. "Usopp, I don't want to know where it is or even if it's real," Luffy said angrily. "If I find out now, I'll quit being a pirate. I don't want to go on a boring adventure." Usopp stumbled over an apology, understanding Luffy's meaning. "Well, it's probably that the real One Piece is the friends you made along the way," Cherry said with a smirk. "Don't say that, you'll jinx it." Luffy redirected his anger towards Cherry whilst she laughed at his antics. "Can you do it? You can't imagine what the Grand Line has in store for you. The enemies will be stronger than you could ever dream of. Can you control that wild sea?" "I don't want to control it. The Pirate King is just the freest man on the sea," Luffy replied, earning a smile from Rayleigh and Shaggy. "I guess you're not just going to say it outright, are you, old man?" Cherry said, drawing everyone's attention. "What do you mean?" Nami asked. "He's been dropping hints this whole time, but he won't say it directly because he doesn't want to influence your adventure. The new world is too much for you guys right now, so you should take it slow and get stronger first," Cherry stated bluntly. She was honestly of the same opinion. "What? But we're so much stronger than we were when we first entered the Grand Line," Usopp insisted. "You guys can go right now if you really want to, but I won't follow you in. Even with all my strength, I'm not that arrogant to think I belong in that sea just yet," Cherry said resolutely. "I know exactly what sorts of monsters dwell beyond that giant red wall. Facing them head-on without the strength or the backing of someone with the strength is tantamount to suicide." This sudden proclamation caught them off guard, and they had no choice but to consider her words seriously. Even the usually headstrong Luffy had to stop and think about her words. If Cherry was anyone else, perhaps he would have dismissed them as overly cautious, but he knew Cherry was just about reckless and crazy as he was. He glanced at Rayleigh, but the old man had quite the poker face and surrendered no opinion on the matter. "Well, it'll take 3 days at least to finish the coding, so you have some time to think. First things first, you have survived the Admiral that's going to be here soon," Rayleigh said. "The Admiral that is already here," Cherry corrected, causing the others to snap out of their stupor. "We should split up and meet back here in 3 days." Zoro suggested. This was accepted by the group, though Sanji didn't miss the chance to mock his poor directional awareness. Rayleigh split up a sheet of V4 card material so they could find him when the time came. Cammy and Hachi thanked them for their help once again, then they set off to figure out what to do with themselves for 3 days. Cherry could hear the sounds of battle around the archipelago. The Admiral in particular was making quite the cacophony, and he was fast. Faster than Cherry ever imagined the people in this world could move, even lightning didn't compare. A heavy figure landed on the ground in front of them. "Kuma?" Zoro shouted, drawing his swords. "That's not Kuma," Cherry said. "What do you mean? He looks like Kuma to me?" Frankie asked. The fake Kuma took off his gloves and fired a beam of intense light at them. Luffy jumped out of the way and the area behind him exploded. Cherry released her sword, which snaked into the fake Kuma's body, and wreaked havoc on its robot components, which made up most of its body. It jerked around, trying and failing to maintain control of itself as smoke started to spill out from it. Eventually it collapsed after a couple tens of seconds, proving to be remarkably resilient to electric-based attacks. "Did you kill him?" Nami asked. "It is still alive if you can call it that. All I did was fry to robotic parts," Cherry said. "I can't imagine who would even bother making a cyborg in this way when it doesn't possess a will of its own." Cherry had sensed the faint vital energy within, but her observation Haki sensed nothing from it, suggesting it lacked free will. "There might be more than one of these things. With armament Haki you should be able to damage them, but you haven't all awakened that," Cherry said. "Should we hide the body before we leave?" Sanji suggested. "That'll take time we don't have. That guy is pretty fast after all. I think the fake Kuma must have alerted him." Cherry said. "Who?" Chopper could finish before a man dressed like a sumo wrestler with a giant double-sided battle axe landed nearby with another fake Kuma. "You guys did a real number on PX4, huh? These pacifista cost as much as a battleship to build too. It'll be a pain to write a report for Vegapunk about this," the sumo man said. "You guys did a..." Cherry looked at the axe the man was holding with scorn. The craftsmanship was familiar to her, of course. "Where did you get that axe, friend?" Cherry's voice had a sinister and cold undertone. "I won't be answering any of your questions. I have the best guard in the world. No secrets can escape my well-guarded mouth," he said. "What's your name?" Chopper asked. "I already told you. I'm the one with the best guarded mouth in the world, Sentomaru," Sentomaru stated. "That was an accident. I wasn't answering your question." "Begin." "PX," Sentomaru commanded, and the pacifista beside him attacked immediately. Cherry's sword flashed into its body and once more wreaked havoc. Sentomaru clicked his tongue in annoyance. "I don't bear any grudges against you, but don't think I'll let you get away that easily," Sentomaru said. He blocked that attacks from Luffy and the others seemingly with ease. Still, he was alone against all of them, so they had some confidence at breaking through. Cherry didn't consider Sentomaru a real threat. His haki was more refined than her own, but Hashokan was designed to penetrate defenses no matter how strong. Cherry sensed someone appear almost instantly behind her, and a kick slammed into her head before she could react. "It's too late for you now," Admiral Borsalino said with a lazy tone. Chapter 104, Scattered to the Winds. The reports about your sturdy body weren't exaggerated, I see. Although it was only a probing strike, your skull wasn't damaged in the slightest," Borsalino said in his slow cadence whistle, looking down at Cherry. "Cherry!" Robin shouted. Her first instinct was to restrain Borsalino or to move Cherry away from him. But her logical mind knew it to be pointless to try against Borsalino's speed. She could only watch in abject horror. Cherry twisted her body around and swung her arm in a strange manner. Borsalino watched it happen curiously. It was too slow and the trajectory of her arm wouldn't even reach him from that position, so he wondered if perhaps he'd put her in a state of confusion due to brain trauma. Suddenly his eyes widened as his haki warned him. He quickly leaned backward as a haki-coated spear pierced the air where his head just was. If he'd been a moment slower, he would be very dead right now. Of course, a moment for Borsalino might as well be a millennia. Crash! Cherry was kicked in the ribs and smashed into the trunk of a nearby mangrove tree, breaking it in half. No one even knew what had happened before the sound reached their ears. "Oh my, that was dangerous. You almost got me there, sort of. Does your fusion fruit let you store weapons inside your body?" Borsalino asked, not expecting an answer. Borsalino raised his arm and an enormous collection of light appeared in his palm, ready to fire directly at Cherry's position. The others could do nothing to help her. They were preoccupied with their own battle and lacked the speed. Pew boom. However, the laser didn't hit Cherry. It was deflected at the last second as Borsalino's arm was kicked off target by Rayleigh. "Oh, you're making an appearance?" "Dark King Rayleigh," Borsalino said, unfazed at being stopped. You shouldn't be plucking young sprouts, their time is only just beginning, Rayleigh said with a menacing smile. While Borsalino and Rayleigh had their little chat, Cherry dug herself out of the pile of broken tree trunk pieces. Her ribs were broken on the right side, but she was otherwise okay due to her split-second application of armament hockey. Everyone, scatter, only think about getting away. Luffy made the wise decision to retreat with all haste. Cherry called her sword back to herself from the twitching pacifista on the ground. Another pacifista landed nearby, causing Cherry to wonder just how many of them they had made. Chopper took his super rumble ball and grappled with the new pacifista in his semi-awakened form. Cherry wasn't interested in the pacifistas though. She was interested in the original who showed up soon afterwards. Bartholomew Kuma landed in front of Cabernet, Zoro, Sanji, Brook and Usopp. He took off his glove and slammed his palm toward Zoro. Cabernet tried to grab Zoro and yank him out of the way, but she was a bit too slow. Both of them vanished into thin air. They couldn't believe their eyes. Zoro and Cabernet were just gone. Cherry knew he'd just sent them flying away, so she wasn't panicking. She sent a quick command to Cabernet before she left communication range to not come looking for her. That Cherry would come to pick her up later. This is for the best. This big teddy bear is going to make the decision for you, Luffy. You're not ready yet, Cherry thought. She also knew exactly where she wanted Kuma to send herself as well. Kuma started picking them off one at a time, much to their horror. They didn't know what was happening to their vanishing friends after all. Kuma stopped next to Rayleigh and whispered something to him. Cherry heard it clear enough with her enhanced sense of hearing. I'm with the Revolutionary Army. Because of our connection, I want to save this group of people. Rayleigh expressed his doubt over those words, but Kuma didn't care. Rayleigh seemed to decide to trust him. Poor Borsalino was left out of the loop, much to his mild annoyance. Kuma resumed his rampage. Frankie charged him in a futile attempt to stop him whilst Nami tried to stop Frankie. Both were vanished just the same. Kuma appeared before Robin, but Chopper got in the way. Leave Robin alone. Chopper was vanished. Robin looked towards Cherry, wondering why she wasn't doing anything to stop this madness. Cherry had a gentle smile and mouthed the words, "See you soon," before she too disappeared, though at the last moment her expression of fear was replaced with confusion. Next was Luffy, who was filled with shame for his own weakness and inability to help his friends. Luffy didn't even put up a fight. We will not meet again. Farewell, Kuma said before Luffy disappeared under his palm. Lastly, Kuma came to Cherry. Are they going to make you like those mindless puppets too? She asked. Kuma was given pause by her words. Once again Cherry was able to cut straight to the truth. I'll give you a parting gift then, Cherry said, soft enough that only Kuma could hear her. Send me to a man who can keep me warm at night. She winked provocatively. This perplexed him for a moment, as he had gotten the impression that she and Nico Robin were together. He quickly understood her meaning, however. He whispered to her, "As you wish, good luck." Finally, Cherry too was sent flying away to a faraway place. As she soared through the skies, gazing up at the clouds as she quickly passed them by, she brought her hands up to cover her face and she screamed full of fury towards the world government. It was such a good sword, damn it. Bartholomew Kuma stood there silently, lost within his thoughts. He wasn't ready to die, and that was the fate he expected to receive soon. It left him with complicated emotions. He was proud of his actions and didn't regret them at all, but the dread of willingly walking to his doom was not lost on him. Suddenly he felt a tiny buzzing sensation shoot up his leg, then his back, then into his head. Before he could react in any way, the sensation had already vanished. What was that, he thought to himself, almost grateful for the distraction from his existential crisis. His thoughts turned back to Harpin D. Cherry's words, that she would give him a parting gift. She certainly hadn't handed anything to him. What that strange feeling, what she meant. He could only hope she wasn't being sarcastic and plotted to kill him after he sent her away. He still needed his body intact to protect the Straw Hats ship until they returned for it, as per the deal with Vegapunk. On a gloomy island where a country was destroyed by war, Perona sat on the balcony of a large castle, lamenting the fact that she had no one to serve her, tending to her every need and whim. Her eyes filled with tears as she wished she could go back to Thrillerbark and her Captain Moria. The sound of something crashing into the ground was heard in the distance. Perona instantly recognized it as someone else being sent here by Kuma, and became excited at the prospect of getting a new servant. She flew over in her ghost form for safety's sake. What she discovered shocked her to the core. Roronoa Zoro? And, hello again. Perona was annoyed to see the green-haired swordsman, as he definitely wouldn't agree to be her servant. Then she changed her tune really quick when she noticed Cabernet was with him as well. Oh, it's the cute pink girl. Cabernet gave a bright smile. Kia, that's not fair. You're cheating by smiling like that, damn it. Perona squealed, then took a forced gruff tone to hide her embarrassment. Why are you screaming like that? Shut up, will you? Zoro said, waking up from his nap. Ouch. Cabernet whacked him on the head and pouted. Don't be rude to Perona. What? She's our enemy though. Ouch. Zoro started to complain before getting walloped again. Damn it, who said that women weren't as strong as men? Perona led them back to the castle, forgetting all about getting new servants now that she had Cabernet all to herself. We need to go out to sea immediately, Zoro complained, seeing Cabernet following Perona. Cabernet turned to look at him. I'm no genius, but I know we aren't going to get back there anytime soon. Staying one night won't hurt. Zoro wanted to argue more, but what she said was true. His best shot at going back was with Cabernet anyhow, so he could only play along. Chapter 105, Impel Down. Chief Warden Magellan of the world's most inescapable prison, Impel Down, finished his 2-hour-long session on the toilet after his breakfast. The meal consisted of sunny-side-up fried eggs covered in poison powder, sausages with gravy laced with poison, and toast with butter and jam, except the jam wasn't even jam, it was just poison. How are things going? Magellan asked his vice warden Hannibal. Fine, Hannibal spoke, though he didn't actually know. He hoped something would go wrong whilst Magellan was in the bathroom. Maybe he'd have a shot at a promotion then. Good, as expected. We can't have anything go wrong right now, not before Fire Fist Ace is taken to be executed, Magellan said. In that moment something crashed into one of the guard towers on the surface. They were quite deep within the submerged prison complex, so they didn't find out about it until a report was made by the guards outside. Warden, something hit one of the guard towers outside. Came a report from a Den Mushi wearing a gas mask. What happened? Magellan asked. We sent men to investigate. There was a large hole in the wall of the tower, but no sign of what it was hit by. The guard reported. Raise the security level just in case and have some men search around. If you need me, I'll be in the usual place, Magellan said, hanging up. He didn't like not knowing the cause of the damage. It might be Whitebeard's men up to something for all he knows. Still, he wouldn't go to the surface, as that could be playing right into the hands of a would-be prison breaker. Meanwhile, Cherry had hidden herself by burrowing into the ground before she could be discovered by any of the guards. Now she was faced with a dilemma of sorts. She couldn't simply navigate through the stone as she only possessed the means to detect living creatures. That would help, of course, but it would only help so much. From what she's heard, Impel Down is a labyrinth. Cherry expanded her life sense. No point in getting worked up about it until after she confirmed whether her target was even here. She found a likely candidate that could be him, devil fruit user, greatly weakened and injured, about the right body shape and size. She regretted that she hadn't met him in person, as that would have made it much easier. On a side note, she found that there were quite a few devil fruit users here, enough that the thought crossed her mind to simply drown the whole prison, just to increase the supply of devil fruit she could find in the future. She quickly dismissed that thought, however. She wasn't that bloodthirsty. She did find it odd that the world government didn't simply execute those devil fruit users. But perhaps they didn't want the devil fruit re-entering circulation. Better to have the devil you know locked up than risk another devil appearing elsewhere. Cherry decided to simply take the plunge down into the depths of Impel Down. She would try to be careful not to get seen, as that would send the whole prison into lockdown, which would be quite counterproductive in a prison break. She burrowed straight down, happy that they didn't build the whole complex out of sea stone. As she went below the surface level, Cherry noticed that one individual with devil fruit powers wasn't cuffed as she would expect. She knew this because the curse portion of the devil fruit inscription wasn't activated within them. She was mostly sure this person wasn't a guard due to their relative positioning to everyone else. This person must be quite cunning to have hidden their devil fruit in this place. They're likely awaiting the perfect moment to attempt escape, Cherry thought. She decided to move towards that person and have a little peek at them. Perhaps they would be a decent ally in her endeavor. She opened up a tiny hole in the wall so she could see who she was dealing with. Just you wait, I'll get out of here soon enough. Then I'll find Captain John's treasure and be rich, he mumbled to himself. The man had long blue hair, red lips, a big red nose, and crossed bones either painted or tattooed on his upper face. In other words, he looked like a clown. Pfft. Cherry accidentally started laughing but quickly got herself under control. Who's laughing at my big red nose? The man shouted, unreasonably enraged. Cherry was barely holding it together. If this guy is playing the fool, then he is by far the best actor I've ever seen. Cherry thought to herself. The important part was that he had hopes of escaping and the guts to attempt it. He shouldn't rat her out if she made him an offer. Psst, Cherry tried to get his attention. Huh? Who's there? The clown asked, thankfully not too loudly. Over here, inside the wall. How would you like to escape this hellhole? Cherry offered with her best deal with the devil tone of voice. The clown, whose name was Buggy, immediately latched onto this opportunity. Of course I want to. Buggy whispered. Did you dig through the walls? Sure did, friend. Just so happens I'm trying to break somebody out of here and I happen to need a guide. If you assist me, I'll bring you out with us. Cherry said. Deal. Buggy didn't bother thinking about it too hard. If this person could break in, they should be able to break out as well. Cherry opened up the wall so he could climb inside, which he did so with haste. It was too dark for him to see the mysterious woman until she lit a match. Buggy almost screamed like a little girl. seeing Cherry's eyes illuminated ominously in the darkness. Cherry was quick to clasp her hand over his stupid mouth though, so he didn't manage to get it out. Cherry removed her hand, and to Buggy's horror, his mouth was still sealed shut. "I'll unfuse your lips when you calm down and promise not to scream again," Cherry said menacingly. Although Buggy's heart was practically beating out his chest, he tried to calm his rapid breathing through his nose and nodded his head. Cherry reached out again and unfused the skin of his lips. "Good, now tell me where I can find Fire Fist Ace." "Eh? Him? He ought to be in the deepest level, being a division leader of Whitebeard's crew," Buggy said nervously. The more he looked at this woman, the more his instincts told him not to upset her. "I don't suppose you'd know the way down there?" Cherry asked, getting a shake of the head no in response. "Well, tell me what your devil fruit ability is. If I know your skill set, I can make better use of you." Cherry spoke after a few moments of thought. "Huh? How did you know I'm a devil fruit user?" Buggy was perplexed. Even the guards didn't know. "I'll introduce myself, then you should know. Perhaps you've heard of the infamous Buggy the Clown?" Buggy asked in response, seeming proud that his name is getting out there even whilst he was imprisoned. "Oh, you're Buggy? Rayleigh happened to mention you to me a few days ago." Cherry was surprised. Perhaps there actually was more to this man than met the eye. "Huh? You know Rayleigh?" Buggy hadn't heard anything about Rayleigh in years. He didn't even know whether he was still alive or not. "I'd like to meet him again someday. Anyways, what's your devil fruit?" I had listed until Rayleigh said your name. Cherry spoiled the mood. The blow to Buggy's ego wasn't light, but it was a big and powerful ego, so it endured. "I ate the chop fruit. I cannot be harmed by cutting, and can freely control my severed body parts," Buggy explained, figuring there was little point in hiding that much. Schwing. Buggy was cut in half across the waist by Cherry's finger. Seeing he was very much still alive, she had her interest piqued. "Wow, impressive. What if I use hockey?" Buggy was too dumbfounded and was too late to stop her. Schwing. He had his head cut off by Cherry's hockey-coated finger. "Oh, even hockey can't cut you neat. In terms of cutting attacks, your devil fruit is superior to even Logia fruit, huh?" Buggy had been getting frustrated with her, but the sudden praise turned his attitude right around. "Haha, of course in the whole world no one is better at being cut than me. In fact, even Hawkeye couldn't cut me," he said, filled with pride. Cherry's teacher instinct were flaring up. She wanted to train him. Even better, once he was stronger, she could sick him on Hawkeye to teach him a lesson in humility. "I'll think we'll get along nicely, Buggy." Cherry smiled, which unnerved Buggy, who had no idea who he'd gotten involved with. Chapter 106, Hiding in the Walls and Floors. "Alright, Buggy, tell me everything you know about Impel Down. I need information," Cherry said. "Well, there's the Chief Warden Magellan, he's a poison man, very dangerous. The Vice Warden Hannibal is incompetent. There's also the 4 jailer beasts I've heard about, they're very strong Zoan fruit users, I think." Buggy started to explain. "There are 5 levels of Impel Down, so Ace ought to be in the 5th one. I don't know how to navigate any of them except this one though." Buggy said. "5 levels? Aren't there 7 levels?" Cherry asked, which Buggy responded to with a shrug. "Maybe the last 2 levels are a secret or something?" "The man I think is probably Ace is on the 7th, Cherry thought. "Okay, you'll lead me to the entrance to the 2nd level. You can either come with me from there, or stay and hope that I can pick you up on the way out," Cherry said. "And I'll say you shouldn't try to escape on your own. The warships outside aren't paddle boats and the prison is inside the calm belt. Even if you get outside, the only way out is through the giant gate," Cherry added. Buggy seriously considered this choice. He definitely didn't want to go further down, but he didn't want to get left behind either. Cherry made a good point that he almost certainly couldn't escape by himself too. He hadn't actually thought that far in his escape fantasies. I'll go with you. But why can't you just move through the walls like this?" Buggy asked, gesturing around himself. "Because it's slow, I can't see where I'm going. If someone on the stronger side notices me somehow I can't dodge, etc. Plus I'd no reason to bring you along if I could, so I wouldn't complain if I were you," Cherry explained. "How do you plan to get Ace out anyways? You just said escape is nearly impossible." Buggy changed the subject. "I'm not going to tell you that, you've got the face of a snitch. You'll rat me out the moment your skin is on the line," Cherry stated bluntly. Buggy's face showed he was greatly offended, but soon after he nodded sagely because that was absolutely true. "I'll open up the wall into the corridor. We'll have to be quick to avoid notice. You stop when I say stop and go when I say go, got it?" Cherry squinted her eyes while poking his chest to drive home that this wasn't up for debate. Buggy gulped and waggled his head up and down in affirmation. Cherry opened up the wall and pushed Buggy out of the hole. "Lead the way." "Okay, hold my feet so I can fly." "It'll be faster and quieter that way," Buggy whispered, attaching from his feet by the ankles. They made very fast progress, with Buggy flying high up out of sight and Cherry's unusual footwork that was both quick and difficult to follow with the eyes. Cherry would signal for him to stop when she sensed a surveillance dendenmushi coming up, and they would pass by its sight through the wall before continuing onwards. The hallway opened up into a vast chamber filled with razor-sharp red trees and grass, as well as numerous venomous insects and arachnids. "This is the first level, the Crimson Hell," Buggy whispered. "It'll be easy enough to avoid the sight of the guard balcony overlooking it," Cherry said before jumping down into the hellscape below. Cherry landed with a crunch as the needle-like grass was crushed under her feet, unable to pierce her tough skin and flesh. Buggy followed close behind until they eventually found their way to the center of the room where a large hole could be seen leading down to the next floor. Cherry waited a few moments, then confidently hopped down into the hole. Buggy hesitated, still not completely sure he wanted to go further down, but ultimately he chose to follow and place his bets on Cherry's capabilities. The next level was called the Wild Beast Hell, because it was filled with many vicious beasts. This level would actually be easier to navigate as Cherry didn't need to avoid most of the beasts, as they would instinctually fear and avoid her. Coincidentally, one of the prisoners on this level was someone that Cherry had met before, Mr. 3. Cherry would not be helping him escape, he could rot here forever for all she cared. Buggy didn't know anything about this floor, so they had to search it more thoroughly. Cherry didn't mind so much as they had plenty of time before Ace's execution date. Cherry spotted something in her peripheral vision, a certain part of a wall behind some sleeping beasts that struck her as odd somehow. She snuck past the sleeping beasts quickly to reach the wall with Buggy floating overhead. Inspecting the wall, she found the reason she thought it was strange. It was actually a secret door of some kind. Where it led, though, was a complete unknown. Still, she decided to take a chance on it, as it couldn't be much more dangerous than being out in the open. She pushed on the wall and it swiveled, allowing herself and Buggy to pass through and closed up behind them. Before them was a narrow passageway that didn't seem like it was often traveled through, a good sign. They both ventured at a downward trajectory that went on for quite a while. Soon it became clear that it was likely leading to a particular gathering of individuals around where Cherry believed to be the 6th level. The raucous sounds of a party could be heard as the path stopped going downwards and leveled out. "Why does it sound like a party? Is it the guards celebrating something?" Buggy wondered aloud. They came to a set of double wooden doors, and Cherry pushed them open, much to Buggy's dismay. Cherry already figured out these people couldn't be guards by the sounds that they made and the conversations she overheard. The large room was well lit, unlike the corridor, and a large number of people, many with flamboyant fashion, ate and drank and danced and sang. On a stage by the far wall, a tall woman with a purple afro and skimpy red leotard was singing bad karaoke, whilst the crowd cheered. "Who's this, new faces? I'm afraid you'll have to die, we can't let the secret of our paradise here be revealed," the woman said in a sing-song voice. "Not really, haha, you really fooled them, Iva," someone shouted. Others joined in with similar sentiments. Although everyone in the room seemed relaxed, Cherry saw through it. They had just enough tension to act against them at a moment's notice if they needed to. Especially this Iva woman. She was a devil fruit user and a highly skilled martial artist. "You're free to stay here, but know that this is a judgment-free area," spoke a man whose left half was in orange and right in white. "By the way, your dress is in some disrepair. Would you like me to tailor it for you?" Cherry clasped the hand of the man that wasn't holding a wine glass aloft. "Forget the dress, please get me some proper martial arts clothes." Cherry didn't mind wearing a dress for a little while for Robin's sake, but she'd been wearing this dress for over 3 days. At least she could keep it clean, but it still didn't feel right. Buggy, on the other hand, wasn't too fazed by the scene before him. His crew, while they weren't Okamas, were somewhat flamboyant in their own ways, so he adapted to the atmosphere easily enough. He went to get a drink since it's been a while. "I think I'll stay here while you do your business," Buggy said. He figured that even if Cherry failed, he would at least be safe and comfortable here. Chapter 107, Ivankov. Cherry was very satisfied with the tailor's, whose name is Inazuma, work. He made a tight-fit dark gray outfit that easily blended into the dark gray stone of the prison. It had an attached hood and mask as well as gloves to ensure that no skin was showing for maximum stealth. "It's very comfortable and warm. I appreciate that you made it with stealth in mind," Cherry complimented honestly. "Of course we didn't see you on any of the surveillance feeds, so I presumed that was what you were in need of," Inazuma said and sipped his wine. "It is very impressive that you managed to break into the prison without being seen, especially with that fool in tow." The woman called Iva pointed a thumb at Buggy, who was already drunk and dancing on top of a table. Iva created needles from her fingers, then jabbed herself in the side. A startling transformation occurred before Cherry's eyes in just a few seconds. Iva transformed from a tall and curvy woman into a shorter man with a giant head. "I am Emporio Ivankov, Queen of Kamabaka Kingdom, Hee-haw Ivankov introduced with a flamboyant pose. I'm Harpin D. Cherry. I don't have a title unless you count Bastard of Hawkeye. Cherry was outwardly unfazed by Ivankov, which caused him to clear his throat with some embarrassment. Ahem, I see, nice to meet you, Ivankov said. An awkward silence fell over them. Wait, did you say you're Hawkeye's daughter? Ah, your eyes are just like his now that I look closely. In any case, I'd love to have some assistance in any capacity that you're willing to grant it. I'm trying to bust Porcus D. Ace out of this hellhole, and I sort of did this on a whim with no preparation whatsoever. Cherry explained. No can do, we've got our own things to worry about, and I'm some charity worker. Ivankov denied her request. Cherry somewhat expected that response. These were criminals after all. It was fortunate enough that they were friendly at all. I see. Can you tell me what you know about Impel Down at least? I'd hate for Kuma's efforts to send me here to be wasted. Cherry said, scratching her head. Huh? Kuma sent you here to break out Fire Fist Ace? Ivankov was shocked. Do you know Kuma? Cherry asked with a twinkle in her eye. No, why would I acquainted with that dog of the world government? Ivankov desperately tried to cover up his slip-up. Inazuma face-palmed. I see, so you're a revolutionary too. Cherry looked Ivankov up and down. Actually, I should have guessed as much earlier. You don't look like a status quo type. Nah, you got that right. How did you know Kuma is a spy though? Did he tell you? Ivankov simply gave up since he was found out anyways. I managed to get him with the classic I didn't know you just told me trick a while back. Cherry said. Nah, you must have gotten him pretty flustered then. He usually such a quiet boy. Maybe he likes you, Ivankov joked. Kuma was very well liked amongst his comrades. Well, if he does, then not for much longer. Vegapunk is going to turn him into a mindless puppet soon. Saving the Straw Hat Pirates was perhaps his last action as a complete man. Cherry spoke sadly. This bombshell did not really shock Ivankov or Inazuma, but it did enrage them. Kuma's undercover mission was exceedingly dangerous, so they were prepared to hear that he'd suffered a bad end one day. It doesn't soften the blow at all, however. I see. Inazuma will fill you in on the details about the prison. I need a drink. Ivankov stalked off, having lost much of his gusto. Inazuma explained what he knew about Impel Down, which fortunately included a fairly detailed map of its interior. The official 6th level was where they kept the most dangerous prisoners, and also where they kept Ace. Hee-haw, Ivankov got his spirits up again, never one to be a downer. I don't know why Kuma wants Ace out, but I'll help you, girlie. We still have time before they take him away, so we can put together a proper plan of action in the meantime. Oh, I'm grateful. Luffy will be very grateful too, I'm sure, Cherry said. Luffy? Ivankov tilted his big head. You know Monkey D. Luffy, grandson of Monkey D. Garp and son of Monkey D. Dragon? Ace is his brother, so he'll be grateful. Cherry explained. Seeing Ivankov's face go through several different emotions at once, told her that he didn't know that information. Dragon has a son? 2 sons? Wait, this is all hard to believe. Too many coincidences. Ivankov shouted. Tell me, where are Luffy and Ace from? I think it was the Goa Kingdom, in East Blue? Cherry said, amused that Ivankov was only just now doubting her. I guess I just have an honest face. Ivankov ordered some nearby Okama to go get whatever records they had on Luffy and Ace. After looking through them and seeing that he really did share a surname and the D initial, as well as coming from the sea the dragon always gazed in the general direction of, he was 99% sure it was the truth. We really can't afford to fail here. This is bad, very bad. Ivankov was stressing out a lot over this. We have time, remember? First I'll sneak down to level 6 and see if I can chat with Ace. You just start thinking about how we can get away from Impel Down if we can reach the surface. That's the biggest problem here. Cherry said. Right. I panicked a bit there. You go on then, don't get caught or I'll strangle you, Ivankov warned. Not really. Nah. The Shichibukai Junbei and Fire Fist Ace sat chained to the walls of their shared cell. Jinbei was humming a song to pass the time and distract himself from the pain of the injuries the jailer beasts inflicted upon him. Many of his neighbors hated when he did it, and would scream at him to shut up, but Ace liked it so he ignored them. I wish I could hear a decent singer sing those songs, Ace said. You'll have to make do with what you have. Beggars can't be choosers, Jinbei said seriously, causing Ace to show a rare smile. Tap. Jinbei felt something tap on his leg. He looked down and saw a pair of eyes peering through a small hole where the wall met the floor. He would recognize those eyes anywhere. Hawkeye? Jinbei kept his voice low, so it would not be heard above the sounds of distant screaming. Ace did hear him though, being in the same cell. He followed Jinbei's gaze and saw those infamous eyes as well. Don't call me Hawkeye, I'm nothing like that deadbeat. I'm as dishonorable as they come, won't get a fair fight from me, no sir. Cherry joked, they didn't laugh. Hearing what was clearly a woman's voice, they knew it couldn't be Hawkeye. Who are you then? Jinbei questioned skeptically, but there was some hope in his eyes. Hope to prevent the war between Whitebeard and the Marines. Harpendee Cherry, I've been traveling with Luffy for several months now. Seeing as his brother was about to execute it, I took it upon myself to rescue you. Cherry said, looking at Ace. Is he here? Ace asked, but his eyes said he didn't want him to be here. No, but I expect he'll wind up coming here eventually, probably at the last minute knowing him. Cherry answered. Ace showed immense relief and let out a sigh. Luffy mentioned you back in Alabasta. It's good to know he has good friends. You should get out of here if you can. You won't be able to help me. I didn't ask for your opinion, twerp. You're getting saved like the damsel in distress that you are, whether you like it or not. Cherry paused and looked at Jinbei. You look like a martial artist. Are you strong? Not strong enough, but yes, I use fishman karate. Jinbei answered. Great, you're coming too then. In exchange for saving you, you'll teach me fishman karate. I'll bet it's pretty interesting. I'll talk to you later when we've got a plan of action sorted out. Don't tell anyone about this, Cherry said, then quickly disappeared into the wall, leaving no hole behind. Chapter 108, Planning. Cherry returned to level 5.5, otherwise known as Newkama Land by its residents. This time she didn't close up the passage as she passed through, as she anticipated that she would be using it again, opting only to close the entrances. Cherry found Ivankov and a now female Inazuma standing over a table with a complex layout of the prison, as well as some ideas about how to deal with the various defenses and guards of Impel Down. Oh, you're back, Cherry. Inazuma welcomed warmly, catching Cherry somewhat off guard as she had been quite cold and distant as a man. I let Ace know he'll be getting rescued. There's a fishman in his cell with him, but I don't think he'll be a problem. Rather, I think he'll be helpful, as he seems to be on good terms with Ace and also seems pretty strong. Cherry informed them of her meeting. A fishman in level 6, huh? That's probably the Shichibukai Jinbei who they brought in recently. Ivankov processed the information. That's good. Prospects aren't looking too good, so we'll need all the help we can get. It'll really be that difficult? With the number of people you have here, it shouldn't be hard to take one of the warships, as well as sail one. Cherry asked. The main problem in her mind was getting out quickly and manning the ship. Both of those problems are solved with more fighters. You're forgetting that we're in the calm belt and that the warships outside aren't paddle boats. The only way to sail out of here is through the giant gate, which can only be opened from the inside. Ivankov explained. The gate? The gate isn't a problem. I'll just go over top of it and open it myself. Really shouldn't take that long, especially if the Marines on the other side are willing to cooperate to avoid the ass-kicking of a lifetime. Cherry said. How are you going to go over it? Do you have any idea how tall that monstrosity is? Ivankov asked doubtfully. Like this, Cherry said. Then she suddenly vanished and loud cracks could be heard in the air around them as Cherry bounced around without landing on any solid surfaces. Cherry landed and placed her hands on her hips proudly. See? Easy peasy, I can do that all day, Cherry smirked. That'll do it. Nah-ha-ha-ha. Ivankov rubbed his hands together like a villain. Now we just need to force our way through quick enough so they can't bring in reinforcements. Not just that, the current will bring us right past Marine headquarters. They have men in constant communication between Impel Down and Marine headquarters so that if anything at all goes wrong, they'll know the moment it happens that something is wrong. We'll be intercepted for sure. Inazuma pointed out. I think I know someone who could help with that. I'll see if I can get in contact. Cherry said, with a particular person in mind. Just bring them here if you can. There's a folktale of sorts here that people mysteriously vanish from time to time. That what they think happened to many of us here, including myself. Ivankov said. Cherry set out into the tunnels once again to get as close as she could to her target on level 3, then burrowed a new tunnel to reach them. Cherry could hear someone shouting above her even through the stone walls. On deux, Cora. Oh, come away. Cherry opened up a hole in the floor. Bon Clay, come with me? Bring your friends here too. Cherry-chan, is that you? Hold on, did you come to break me out of prison? Bon Clay started to sob from the joy of friendship. Nope, Cherry shut him down instantly. I just need your devil fruit. If I could take that and leave you here, I would. Her words stabbed into his heart without mercy. I'm kidding, I definitely didn't plan to leave you here until I needed your skill set, Cherry smirked. Why, you shouldn't be mean to your friends. Maybe I won't come with you, huh? How about that? Bon Clay said, putting up a false resistance. Oh, I guess you don't want to meet Emporio Ivankov then. Have fun rotting here, Cherry teased, closing up the hole behind her. No, take me with you please. You want to meet Aviva-sama, Bon Clay begged whilst clawing at the place where the hole just was. Cherry opened it back up, and Bon Clay dived inside without giving her the chance to close it again. After bringing the other prisoners in the cell into her tunnel, she led them all back to Newkama Land. Bon Clay started fangirling over Ivankov immediately. This is Bon Clay. His devil fruit lets him take the appearance of people he's touched with his right hand. We can use that to replace the Marine in communication with Marine headquarters to buy us as much time as possible. Cherry explained, receiving nods of affirmation. So you did just want my devil fruit? You're a monster, a monster. Bon Clay accused Cherry, who could only laugh. Don't be angry, Bon-chan. Luffy's brother is locked up and scheduled to be executed. Rest assured that I'll do everything in my power to get you out of here as well. Cherry patted him on the shoulder to reassure him. She wasn't really fond of Bon Clay, but she did respect him at least. After all, his life had been saved by them, and he still fought against them in Alabasta. Although he used himself as bait for them to get away afterwards, somewhat redeeming himself, Cherry didn't particularly like his fickle attitude towards the people he called friends. After talking a bit and ironing out some more details for their plan of action, Cherry decided to turn in for the night. Over the next few days, Cherry formed a much more robust tunnel system throughout the entirety of Impel Down. Now that she had a clear idea of the layout, it was relatively easy to do so, whereas before she was worried about accidentally breaking through to an open space. They also worked out who would be best to include in their prison break. The prisoners on the upper levels would be easy to control and wouldn't be too harmful to release into the outside world. The prisoners on lower levels were strong but weren't so easy to control. Many of them also had grudges against Whitebeard, especially those from level 6. Ivankov said they should involve Crocodile, as Ivankov apparently had some dirt on him that he wouldn't want getting out. Oh, what is it that you know that can make a prideful guy like Crocodile become obedient? Cherry wanted to know, as Ivankov made it sound like some real juicy gossip. I won't say anything unless Crocoboy doesn't want to cooperate. Otherwise he wouldn't trust that I'll keep quiet about it. Ivankov said, disappointing her greatly. No fun at all, Cherry pouted. We need to make a decision now. We have everything ready to go. Do we do it as soon as possible, or do we wait until the ships that will escort Ace to Marine headquarters get here? If we wait, then the fight here will be harder, but it will save us some trouble later on. Inazuma stated. Personally, I'd rather fight the escort here. It's almost certain admirals will get involved when they find out what's happened. Removing some vice admirals and their warships from that fight will improve our chances. Cherry stated her opinion. Also, it's not unlikely that Luffy will turn up here if Kuma sent him anywhere nearby. I don't want him to be here on his own. That makes sense to me. We'll wait until the day before the execution to make our move. Hee-haw, Ivankov said. Chapter 109, Chief Warden Magellan. Cherry went down to level 6 to fill Ace and Jinbe in on the plan. Garp had paid a visit to Ace earlier in the day before returning to Marine headquarters. She was grateful for this because it further solidified Ivankov's misunderstanding, that Ace wasn't actually Luffy's brother by blood. He doesn't need to know that. I can't afford to lose his help at this point, Cherry thought. Cherry opened up the hole in the floor next to Jinbe. Hey, we've got the plan worked out and all our preparations are completed. Now we're just waiting for Ace's escort to show up so we can take out the vice admirals here rather than later on. Divide and conquer and all that nonsense. Cherry informed them. I am also ready to go, Jinbe stated. Luffy isn't here, right? Ace's concern lied elsewhere. No, that's also part of the reason we decided to wait. Didn't want Luffy to turn up here and not have any allies to help him get back out. Cherry said. Speaking of allies, you don't happen to know of anyone down here that would support us? We have our own list of people we think we can control or trust, but are there any allies of Whitebeard down here that you know about? Not really. There's only losers who hate the old man down here, not you, Jinbe, Ace said. There also isn't really anyone down here that's easy to control either as far as I know. I see, that's a shame. Having more help would always be better, Cherry said. Cherry sensed a couple of familiar people enter the range of her life sense and arrive at the prison on the surface. It would seem that Luffy has come to Impel Down as expected, aboard a Vice Admiral's ship no less. Cherry narrated. What? Ace and Jinbe were shocked. How do you even know that? Ace asked. Never mind how I know. I'll see you later when we start the plan. Right now I need to collect Luffy before he makes a mess of things. The last thing we need right now is the prison going on higher alert. Cherry said, then closed up the wall before they could say or ask anything more. Cherry swiftly navigated the tunnel network back to Newcoma Land. She told Ivankov that Luffy had shown up and to be ready to start the plan immediately if Cherry didn't reach him in time to stop him from making a ruckus. Then she worked her way to the top of the prison through one of the vertical shafts she'd created for speedy transit for herself. Cherry had to carve a new tunnel to reach the room that Luffy had stopped inside. There were 2 other people in the room with him, and a surveillance Dendenmushi. The surprising part was that Luffy was wrapped around the other person who was a devil fruit user. They're smuggling him inside perhaps? He's being more thoughtful than he usually is, Cherry thought. We don't suspect you, but procedure states that you have to wear these sea stone cuffs. A woman's voice was heard through the wall. Please be gentle, another woman's voice said. Eh? The first woman said, then went silent. Cherry noticed that the second woman's devil fruit activated, and a change came over the first woman, as well as the surveillance Dendenmushi. That was close. I was about to just take my chances, Luffy said, climbing off of the woman. At this point Cherry opened up the wall and poked her head out. Psst, Luffy, Cherry called out in a whisper. Huh, Cherry? Luffy exclaimed. Who is this woman? Why is Luffy so happy to see her? Is she Luffy's girlfriend perhaps? Hancock inwardly panicked, barely maintaining her composure. Cherry didn't miss the way she was acting and had an idea why as well. Whistle wow Luffy, only been away for a week and already got yourself beautiful girlfriend. Cherry teased. What, girlfriend? My. His. Hancock didn't finish the thought before she got lost in Fantasyland. Right, Hancock is my friend. She has helped me a lot. Luffy smiled. The sudden and ruthless friend zoning sent Hancock spiraling into depression. Anyways, I'm going to bust Ace out soon. Hop into the hole. Is Hancock coming too? Cherry asked. Hancock shook herself out of her melancholic stupor. No, I have to keep up this act. Luffy nodded and thanked her whilst clasping her hands, then resolutely jumped into the tunnel. Cherry closed it behind him and gave Hancock a wink. Hancock took it as a challenge and swore to be the one who would win Luffy's love and adoration in the end. You're going to be surprised, Luffy. There's an old friend waiting for you down there too, Cherry said, patting Luffy on the back as they descended. Who? Luffy asked. I won't ruin the surprise, just wait and see. Cherry insisted on keeping her secrets. When they reached Nukama Land and Cherry opened the door, Bon Clay turned to look and saw Luffy and Luffy saw him. Bon-chan, Luffy cheered. Luffy-chan, Bon Clay cheered. You're still alive, shishishi. Luffy hugged him and spent some time catching up. Afterwards, Luffy was filled in on the plan. He wasn't too happy that they wanted to wait, but ultimately he decided it was the best chances they would have. All that remained was to wait until the time came. The hours passed slowly as the anticipation built up. Their people were in position to swarm into the prison and cause as much chaos as possible on the first 3 levels by releasing the prisoners there. Other men would break out select individuals on the lower levels. Cherry's job was to take out Magellan. Most of his strength came from his poison devil fruit from what Cherry had heard, so she was very confident that she could deal with him. Between her body cultivation and devil fruit, she could easily break down any poison that entered her body. The time came, Cherry sensed the vice admirals arriving with their warships and signaled the start of the operation. They moved into their positions quickly. Cherry went to find Magellan. Luffy, Ivankov and Inazuma went to grab Ace, Jinbei and Crocodile. Bon Clay went to the communications room to replace the marine there and keep a false all-clear message going through. Cherry saw that Magellan entered an elevator and moved to the tunnel she made to intercept it. Boom. Cherry brought out her spear and burst through the wall of the elevator shaft as well as through the wall of the elevator. Who the hell are you? Harpin D. Cherry? Magellan recognized her quickly. He was a large man in a black trench coat and an almost monstrous face, with his hair pulled up into the shape of horns. I'm your worst nightmare, Cherry charged him. Magellan's body erupted with purple poison, much to the dismay of the other guards on the elevator. He easily covered Cherry in the toxic goo, as she didn't even try to dodge it. You're a fool is what you are. Magellan spoke calmly, retracting his poison as he believed that she was done for. Cherry didn't stop and pressed forward. She stabbed out with her spear and Magellan caught it by the shaft. You're already slowing down, your fate is sealed. Magellan said. Bang. Huh? Magellan put his hand against his abdomen and when he looked at it, he saw it was covered in blood. Where did you get that gun? Cherry suddenly increased the strength with the spear and pierced him on the other side of his abdomen. Warden? The other guards cried out. They didn't dare to move in for fear of the poison. Magellan swung at her, but Cherry jumped and kicked him in the head. He collapsed to the floor of the elevator unconscious. Cherry looked at the guards who were glaring angrily at her. You should take care of your boss rather than get in my way. The elevator arrived at the bottom and she stepped out when the doors opened. Chapter 110, Prison Break. Cherry walked through the corridors to Ace and Jinbei's cell, occasionally flicking some of Magellan's poison as the prisoners who were dumb enough to catcall her. Just as she arrived, Inazuma finished picking the lock on Ace's cell and walked across the hall to Crocodile's cell with Ivankov in tow. Luffy followed behind helping Ace to get reacquainted with standing up and walking. Stop trying to help me, Luffy. I'm not a baby, I can stand on my own. Despite the harsh tone of his rebuke, Ace's face revealed that he was just embarrassed at having been saved by his younger brother, as well as his happiness. Jinbei came lumbering out afterward. He didn't have any trouble as he was a particular sturdy individual, even after all the beatings he's taken since they locked him up down here. Crocoboy, it's good to see you again. Not, Ivankov mocked. What do you want? Crocodile asked with a scowl. You're going to help us bust out of here. Unless you want me to tell your secret to the whole world? We can get out just fine without you, so don't waste my time and decide. Ivankov gave his ultimatum. Crocodile's face distorted into several interesting expressions before finally coming to rest on his usually disdain for everyone around him. Fine, Crocodile replied curtly. Cherry approached them at this point. Magellan is out of commission. Oh, I'm surprised you finished so quickly, Cherry. You're covered in poison? Ivankov shouted. Don't make a big deal about it. Magellan will have to try harder than that to poison me to death. Cherry said, then immediately collapsed face first into the floor. Somebody call a doctor, she's dying. Ivankov panicked. The others also had looks of concern, except for Crocodile and Luffy. The former was sneering with schadenfreude, while the latter was just looking at Cherry with a blank look. Cherry, I thought we were in a hurry. Why are you joking around? Luffy asked. What are you saying? She's been poisoned by Magellan. She doesn't have long to live, boy. Ivankov exclaimed. He didn't have the time to give her his hormone treatment for it. That would take days. You used to be so easy to fool, Luffy. It saddens me greatly. Cherry said dramatically as she stood up. There's no way I'd fall for the playing dead trick 17 times. Luffy spoke with a strange sense of pride. The others looked at him and they all thought, you fell for it times? Luffy had almost fallen for it this time as well, in all honesty. However, then he remembered that Cherry could easily cure poisoning with here devil fruit from the time she cured the poisoning of the villagers back on the flying islands of Mervale. She ha ha ha, you're awfully relaxed for people breaking out of Impel Down. A familiar laugh and voice came from one of the cells. Looking inside, they found the golden lion Shiki. He had sea stone shackles around his neck, waist and 2 on each arm. It brings back memories, you know. When I broke out of here 20 years ago, I had to cut off my own legs to get out of the sea stone shackles. Shiki said, then raised his arms and jangles the shackles on his arms. But I can't exactly cut off both my arms, my lower torso and my head, can I? Shahahaha. I can help you with that if you want, cutting you up into little pieces, I mean. Cherry mocked. I think I'll pass, thank you. Shiki said. He closed his eyes and struck a dignified pose. Don't ask me to help you either. I won't do it even if you beg me. When he didn't hear a response, he peeked out of his left eye and saw that nobody was there. Cherry and Co. re-entered the tunnel and Cherry closed up the tunnel behind them so it couldn't be used by the guards to trace back to New Kama Land. Although they were leaving, they couldn't know if they'd ever be back someday, so it was best to leave it there for them. As they made their way up to the highest secret entrance to New Kama Land, the Marine Vice Admirals were getting impatient. Where is Magellan? He was supposed to be bringing Fire Fist Ace to us, said Vice Admiral Onigumo, clearly irritated. I'm sorry, sir, there seems to be a commotion on the first few levels. The chief warden is probably giving out directions before going to get Ace. One of the prison guards made an excuse. He didn't know much about what was going on below, just that a prison riot had started out of nowhere. But he couldn't just admit that, as it would make the guards and the chief warden look bad. Onigumo squinted his eyes at the quibbling idiot before him. He would not be late in performing his duty of delivering Ace to Marineford. It was bad enough that he had been brought low by that wretched cheap-shot Cherry during the Buster call, completely failing to kill any of the criminals at Eni's lobby. Moreover, he was not the type to make excuses when he failed, even if it was due to someone else's incompetence. I'm going in, Vice Admiral Onigumo insisted, walking forward without waiting for a reply. I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Vice Admiral, one of the guards started to say and stand in his way. Bang! Vice Admiral Onigumo shot the guard where he stood, shocking the other prison guards to the core. You do not have the authority to tell me what I can or cannot do. Men, if they try to resist us any further, they are to be treated as traitors and executed summarily. He shouted behind him, Yes, sir. His men responded instantly, knowing that he really meant what he said and that any resistance to his orders would only earn them the same fate. He marched inside with his men followed in an orderly fashion behind him. The other guards made no attempt to block his path this time. The first thing Onigumo heard was the faint sounds of distant battle. He immediately scowled. A commotion, is it? Disgraceful. He and his men followed the sounds down to the first level, and it was exactly what he feared that he would find. A horde of pirates and other criminals pushing back the prison guards. Keep pushing, we're almost there, almost to freedom. A clown shouted from the back, which seemed to spur them on to fight that much harder. Vice Admiral Onigumo transformed, forming 3 new sets of spider-like arms from his back. He drew out 8 swords altogether, and intended to deal with the pirates with extreme prejudice. As he launched himself forward, however, he was met in the air by the woman he hated more than anyone in the world. She forced him back with a powerful thrust of her spear. Harp indeed, Cherry, he growled with rage. Oh hey, it's you. Did you want me to give you my special service again? Cherry smirked. Onigumo resisted the instinct to clench his legs together, and wasted no words with the wicked woman. He launched into a flurry of attacks with his many blades. Cherry was strangely able to fend off the attack with just her spear and the occasional kick. The battle looked quite fierce, but at this point neither of them were being pushed back. You know, I've been thinking about this since the last time we met. Why do you grow 6 new arms? If you're supposed to be a spider you should only have 8 limbs, but right now you have 10. 8 arms and 2 legs. Cherry chattered away like she wasn't being attacked by someone who had every intention of killing her. Onigumo was desperately trying to keep his anger in check. He knew how dangerous losing your cool in battle was. She wasn't making it very easy to do that. Do you know why they nicknamed me Cheap Shot, Mr. Vice Admiral, sir? Cherry asked. He instantly scanned her for any dirty tricks. Hey, A dirty trick doesn't have come from my own hand to be dirty, you know. Buggy, Cherry shouted. Special muggy ball, Buggy shouted from only a few meters behind the Vice Admiral with his foot raised in his direction. A tiny red ball was shot out of a hidden compartment inside his foot and landed right on Onegumo's back. Kaboom! A devastating explosion far greater than one would expect from such a tiny projectile. Cherry didn't expect it to finish off the Vice Admiral though. So she ruthlessly attacked the very instant after the explosion occurred, piercing into the Vice Admiral's body. Rah! Onegumo pressed forward, burying the spear deeper into his torso in an attempt to end Cherry's life as she now possessed no weapon to block with. However, his vision was blocked by the dust kicked up in the explosion and his attacks met nothing but air. Wow, I only released the spear just in case, but I didn't expect you had the guts to actually do it. You have my respect, sir. As such, I shall finish you off in the honorable manner I know how. Cherry exclaimed. Ding! The sound of a kick hitting a metal plate was heard even over the cacophony of the battle, drawing everyone's attention. Onegumo collapsed to the ground, legs squeezed together. Pirate, prison guard and marine alike couldn't help but wince and bring their own thighs together in subconscious fear. Hee-haw, I like the way you fight, girlie. Ivankov praised as he arrived on scene with the others and the rest of the prisoners they had broken out on the lower levels. Chapter 111 Passing Through the Gates. Damn it, what happened to the chief warden, vice warden, chief guards and jailer beasts? Head jailer Domino exclaimed, seeing the situation had spun completely out of control. Of course they had all been wiped out. The chief warden fell by Cherry's hands, and the rest were dealt with swiftly by Cherry's allies. Domino retreated towards the communications room. She wouldn't be able to stop the prison break from happening, but she could still try to maintain contact with Marineford, as well as possibly calling more reinforcements. When she reached the door to the communications room, she found it locked. This was natural, of course, given what was going on. She fumbled around with the keys before finally getting it unlocked and pushed against it once more. It barely budged, it was barricaded from the other side. This is Chief Jailer Domino. Let me in, I need to send a report back to headquarters. Domino shouted, but not too loud as to alert anyone nearby. How can I trust you? There's a prisoner who can take on people's appearances, you might be him in disguise. The communications officer shouted back, voice trembling. Domino racked her brain and realized what he said was true. There was a prisoner like that here. Bentham, she thought it was. Damn it, that's right, I know how I can prove it to you. 2 years ago I got you that pineapple upside-down cake for your birthday. You couldn't eat it because you're allergic to pineapples. Domino spoke frantically as the sounds of battle drew ever closer behind her. She heard a chair scrape against the floor away from the door. She pushed the door open and slammed it shut behind her, locking it once again. She let out a huge sigh of relief and turned around. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat and her body freeze. Oh dear, I would have loved to try that cake. I love pineapples. The communications officer said in a strange accent, before pirouetting in a quick circle. All around her colleague were the unconscious forms of the communications staff. Strangely, even the communications officer was slumped against the wall, foaming at the mouth despite him clearly standing right in front of her with an unnervingly wide grin. Bon Clay touched his left hand to his face, transforming back into his original body. Shit, was the last thing she said before getting knocked out by the Okuma's kick. Bon Clay turned back into the communications officer and sat down. All clear. He spoke the very same words he'd been speaking every 10 minutes. The door blasted open, and Cherry walked inside at a leisurely pace. Time to go. Bon Clay nodded and followed her outside where the prisoners had triumphed over the guards and the Marines who came inside. All that remained was the other Marines outside, which consisted of 4 full ships and 2 more vice admirals. The ships sprung into action with the intention of bombarding the surface of the prison when the pirates started to pour out. Unfortunately, the giant gate was closed, either due to protocol or because they didn't want to take any chances. All the ships were accounted for, so Cherry at least didn't worry they had sent a ship ahead to ask for help. The remaining crew from Onegumo's ship tried to quickly get the ship away from the dock platform, but they were too slow and the pirates were already swarming over it. The other marine ships gave no quarter to their comrades on that ship, and started to bombard it at the same time as the dock. Hey you Candle Boy, Cherry grabbed Mr. 3 who was hiding amongst the crowd. Make a small boat with handle grips. Jinbei, you can carry some people over that distance, can't you? Yes, I can do that, Jinbei spoke simply. Even amongst fishermen known for their great strength, he was particularly strong. Mr. 3 got to work making a wax raft for Jinbei to carry. Meanwhile, Cherry bounded through the air, each step making a loud cracking sound that easily carried over the water to the other ships. The other 2 vice admirals ordered them to focus fire on her, but it was difficult to hit her even with a barrage of bullets and cannon fire. Meanwhile, Jinbei and the others had the heat taken off them and were able to move much more quickly. Jinbei jumped into the water and their powerhouses got onto the wax raft for him to carry them across, which included Ivankov, Inazuma, Luffy, Ace, Crocodile, Mr. Wan, Bon Clay and Buggy for some reason. Cherry landed on one of the ships and started wreaking havoc, sending Marines flying overboard left and right. The two remaining vice admirals came to confront her, but they were clearly not the cream of the crop among the vice admirals, probably only here to be Onagumo's backup. As such, she was able to fight them both to a standstill. A stalemate against Cherry was basically a loss, however, as she was able to take much more punishment and had far more stamina than they did. She could probably deal with them more quickly, but that would require spending more effort than was necessary when she could just wait until her allies arrived. And arrive they did. Jinbei used fishman karate to send the wax raft flying into the air, and landed them all onto one of the ships. At that point it was basically over. The ships were quickly captured in short order and Cherry got her back up to take out the vice admirals rather anticlimactically. The pirates cheered with great gusto at their success. Now we just need to get through the gates. You said you'd go over top of them, right, Cherry? Ivankov confirmed. Right, Cherry said. However, it would be necessary for them to open the gate, as it was now starting to open without their interference. Damn, Cherry shouted and dove at Ace, who panicked at her sudden tackle. Cherry dragged him away below the deck of the warship with her hand firmly clasped over his mouth. Seeing him struggle and even try to use his devil fruit to escape her grasp, she slammed a hockey-coated Hashokan palm into his head, rattling his brain and instantly knocking him out cold. Luffy had followed behind and protested in anger. What are you doing, Cherry? Before he could start a fight with her over some misunderstanding, she spoke quickly with a rushed tone. There's an admiral or something coming, I had to hide him. This stopped Luffy's attack, though he was still grumpy about it. You should go out there unless you have to either. Come here, Cherry demanded. Her voice contained just the right amount of concern that Luffy followed along with her on instinct. She slowed down his energy circulation as well, which made him very lethargic. It would be easy enough to revive the both of them. Then she used her vital energy to slow down his natural energy circulation temporarily, thus reducing his presence by a great deal. The gates finally opened enough for a ship to pass through, and they saw a lone marine warship do just that. Except no Marines were seen on board. Instead, there was a motley crew of powerful pirates, led by Blackbeard. Gee ha ha, look what we stumbled across, a prison break. Looks like our work will be much easier. Blackbeard laughed. That's good, you should go get involved in Whitebeard's war too, stir up more chaos. His ship passed them by and head to the prison, probably to break some of his own new recruits out, or perhaps old friends. What are you waiting for? Go go go, Cherry demanded, which got the scurrying to pass through the open gate. Once they were safely beyond the threshold, Cherry jumped over to the control tower and figured out how to make it shut. She didn't know what that Blackbeard guy was up to, but it likely didn't align with their goals. Better to stall them in any way they could. Cherry revived Ace and Luffy, who both looked rather annoyed with her. Don't be big babies about it. I thought there was an admiral coming through from his strength, but instead it was Blackbeard. Since he's the one who put you in there, it's better he didn't know that we got you out. He seemed to assume you were already taken ahead to Marineford, and he'd have been right if those plans hadn't been delayed indefinitely, Cherry explained. Ace scowled at Blackbeard's name, but he knew that Cherry was right to do what she did. Blackbeard wasn't to be taken lightly, and he also had his whole crew with him too. Never mind Blackbeard. He's behind us now. All we have to do is get past Marineford, then escape via Enies lobby, and we're home free, Ivankov said, garnering more cheers from the pirates. Chapter 112, Sailing for Marineford. They all had a short time to rest and recuperate before they got close to Marineford and needed to be on guard. The pirates on board the ships changed into marine uniforms to disguise themselves from any prying eyes from afar. This included Ace especially, as they didn't want to chance him getting suddenly kidnapped by someone like Admiral Borsalino. Can anyone think of a countermeasure for Admiral Aokiji freezing the ocean? I've heard that's one of his favorite tactics to stop ships in their tracks, Cherry said. Everyone looked around at each other, but no one could think of any real counter to something so large-scaled. Ace regretted not spending more time working with his devil fruit. If he had awakened it, Aokiji's Ice Age attack could be countered. A pointless worry, as one could never be sure how easy or difficult it will be to do so. It relied heavily upon one's own luck, as no one else could teach you. I might be able to break one ship out, but not the whole area, Jinbei offered, but he knew it wasn't much. Well, there's something I could try. However, if I were to be honest, I've never done it before, and I have no idea how effective it would be. It might even kill us all instead, Cherry said. Many were resolved to die trying rather than be doomed, whilst others didn't like the idea of gambling with their lives. There is another way, assuming we don't get frozen on the inside of the gate. We could join up with Whitebeard and fight our way through the Marines, instead of trying to bypass Marineford and heading to Enies lobby, Crocodile said, though he had his own ulterior motives such as trying to kill Whitebeard. We don't know when Whitebeard will appear though. We might end up all dying fighting the Marines before he shows up. There'll be some time before the execution is supposed to start when we arrive after all. Jinbe pointed out. Well, that just sounds like we gamble our lives and flee, or gamble our lives and fight. I'd rather take my chances with the old man. Ace spoke. Well, we do have many ships. If we can't come to a majority decision, then we can split up. The fighters would actually be giving the cowards a decent shot at escaping too, Cherry said, which made her own opinion on the matter clear enough for everyone. Although many of the pirates didn't like being called cowards just for wanting to run away. They could exactly refute the woman who toyed with 3 vice-admirals before their very eyes. Not to mention they didn't mind being cowards if it meant they wouldn't die, or worse be sent back to Impel Down. They decided to split up the ships for those who wanted to fight and those who wanted to flee. Unsurprisingly, the stronger members of their motley group unanimously decided to fight and hope Whitebeard wasn't fashionably late for the party. Many of the weaker pirates decided to stick with the strong ones, as they did not want to be called cowards. Or to regret deciding to flee if they were caught at Eni's lobby because they didn't have any powerhouses to back them up. Cherry found it odd that Buggy and Mr. 3 of all people decided to stick with the fighters. I'm surprised, Buggy. I thought for sure you'd run away with your tail between your legs, Cherry commented. What do you mean surprised? I'm not a coward, damn it. Buggy shouted, taking offense. He was a coward though. His instincts just told him that this was the safest place to be. Right next to the people who could fight in his stead and bear the brunt of the danger. Many of the pirates cheered his name. It seems that he's been doing some public relations to improve his image. Cherry looked at Mr. 3, who seemed like he was eager for her to ask his reasoning so he could stroke his own ego. How pitiful. It seems the Candleman here has been tortured to idiocy during his stay at Impel Down. He didn't realize this was the side to fight, not to flee. Cherry spoke, pretending to wipe away tears. This really got Mr. 3 riled up, but the only thing he could do about it was to huff in annoyance. Purururu. A den mushi said in one of the masts rang. Cherry rubbed her throat and did some vocal exercises that got progressively deeper in tone. Then she picked up the receiver. Vice Admiral Onagumo reporting. Cherry said in a very convincing impression. Your report is late. Did you retrieve Firefist Ace? The voice on the other end asked. Impel Down experienced a prison break attempt right as we arrived, so it couldn't be helped that we're slightly behind schedule. The prisoner is being transported as we speak. Cherry spoke. Your report has been confirmed. Continue onwards to Marineford. The man on the other end responded and hung up. Cherry also hung up. That was pretty impressive, and coming from me that's high praise. Bon Clay sang. Hopefully it was enough, Cherry said. Jinbe Ivankov, show me your martial arts. I want to still at them. Ivankov didn't mind teaching her, even though their martial art was usually reserved for Okama. Jinbe protested that since she was a devil fruit user, she wouldn't be able to perform fishman karate to any great extent, but she brushed off those concerns and insisted. Cherry spent the remaining time watching the various forms of the martial arts and memorizing them for future use. Marineford, the communications officer who just finished receiving the report from Onagumo, picked up one of the short-range denmushis. It rang for a few moments before being picked up. What is it? A man spoke. Yes, Fleet Admiral Sengoku. We just received a report from Vice Admiral Onagumo, sir. The communications officer said. Good. Is everything all right? It's not like Onagumo to be late with his reports. Sengoku asked. The Vice Admiral reported a prison break at Impel Down, but that he has Firefist Ace in custody and is bringing him to Marineford. He reported. I see. Send out some warships to assist if necessary, Sengoku said. Sir, the officer said but hesitated. What is it? Sengoku had a bad feeling all of the sudden. Vice Admiral Onagumo, sir, I think something was off, the officer stated, knowing he was putting his career on the line for this. Out with it, Sengoku ordered, furrowing his brow. He made an excuse, sir. He said it couldn't be helped that he was late because of the prison break. The officer said. He knew Onagumo's reputation as well as anyone. Damn it. Sengoku almost smashed the denmushi but stopped and hung it up gently. He put his head in his hands and let out a long sigh. Bwahaha, they got us good, and here we were thinking they'd attack Marineford directly. Garp laughed whilst eating rice crackers. You shouldn't be so happy about it, Garp, Sengoku reprimanded. Who says I'm happy? Garp said, but the smile on his face was as wide as the ocean. Sengoku picked the denmushi back up and gave out orders. The gates of justice were to be opened wide, and warships assembled to intercept the oncoming ships, only leaving a path into Marineford open. They needed to recapture Ace no matter what. The bloodline of Gold D. Roger must be eradicated, or else they'll end up having another Roger on their hands. One raised to rule by Whitebeard no less. Cherry and the others were unaware of the actions taking place as they sailed towards what many would consider their doom. Chapter 113, One Path Forward. Ivan Ivankov and Jinbei were demonstrating the forms of Newcomer Kenpo and Fishman Karate respectively, as well as explaining the philosophy behind each of them to Cherry simultaneously. She had insisted upon doing it that way in spite of their protests, saying that it would save time. They were naturally doubtful she could properly follow along in this fashion, but figured if Cherry was wasting her and their time, that was on her. Contrary to their expectations, however, she not only was able to listen well enough to both of them to ask questions, she also demonstrated the forms they showed her before their very eyes. Cherry even realized her own mistakes by comparing herself to their demonstrations, and corrected them without their input. "What kind of monster are you?" They both asked her at the same time. "The cute kind?" Cherry smiled at them in a very not cute sort of way. They could only shake their heads at her in exasperation. "I can see something ahead," called a pirate in the lead ship's crow's nest. Cherry hopped up there to see what he spotted and frowned a bit at what she saw. Jumping back down, the others had gathered to hear what it is. "There's a blockade of marine warships ahead of us blocking the way past the gates of justice. Not only that, there is a massive wall of ice behind them that stretches for miles, and I think it has actually redirected the current straight through the gates into Marineford," Cherry explained. "It seems we don't have a choice in the matter then. The only way out is through Marineford." Jinbei commented, "Doesn't matter to us, only to the cowards." Crocodile spoke derogatorily. "It does matter, Croco boy. They realize the truth somehow and are waiting to ambush us. This'll be much harder than we had hoped." Ivankov rebuffed. "So what? We'll just kick their asses," Luffy said all gung-ho. Ace smacked him upside the head. "Idiot, they have 3 admirals, the fleet admiral and the geezer with them. Not to mention we'll be greatly outnumbered and outgunned. Maybe we should slow down, stall for more time for Whitebeard to come?" Buggy said, trying to hide his timidity. "If we do that, in the worst case they might come to us and we'll be much further from our escape when we're forced to fight them," Inazuma observed. As they spoke, they quickly approached the waiting marine warships, as the current was quite fast. There was only one option. "Charge forward, stop for nothing, fight like your lives depend on it, because it does," Cherry shouted, amplifying her voice for all to hear. There was a half-hearted cheer in agreement, as they were all terrified of dying or being sent back. "What are you all being so chicken for? Where did your balls go? You're pirates. This is a moment that will go down in history as a glorious victory against the bastards who tortured you," Buggy shouted, raising a sword aloft. "And if you follow me, I'll lead to an even grander destiny, as the crew of the next king of the pirates." "Me." The ships erupted in cheers bordering on hysteria. "He's awfully good at that," Crocodile admired honestly. He almost envied him if he didn't know Buggy was all talk. On the marine warships blockading the current. Vice Admiral Bastille reporting, "We've spotted ships approaching us. I believe they're the warships that were sent with Vice Admiral Onagumo to bring the prisoner. There is no sign of Whitebeard." Bastille spoke into a Dendenmushi. Sengoku furrowed his brow. "That doesn't sound like something Whitebeard would do. Is he not behind this? Intercept them," Sengoku ordered. The marine warships ahead of them started to move towards them. They were paddle boats, so they were able to go against the current somewhat. "Damn, they won't even let us pass them before they try to kill us," Cherry said annoyed. "Bring me cannonballs. I'll give them a taste of the old Garp special, hehe." The pirates began passing the cannonballs directly to Cherry in a line to keep them coming efficiently. Cherry picked up the first cannonball, got a feel for the weight, and reared in back in a pitching pose. Crack! It broke the sound barrier by a wide margin. She had been holding back when she was chucking them at Garp previously. Of course, Garp had been holding back too. The cannonball slammed into the bow of the closest ship just above the waterline and exploded, ensuring that it would start to take on water immediately. Cherry got serious and wasted no time grabbing the next cannonball and launching it. Once she got a rhythm going, she became like a machine. Luffy hadn't seen Cherry like this before. She had taken on the guise of an efficient killer. The others were also a bit unnerved at this cold and merciless side of her, except Crocodile, who saw a bit of himself in her. The Marines on the approaching ships were starting to panic, even Vice Admiral Bastille. Cherry was throwing cannonballs faster than a dozen cannons could fire in succession. Moreover, her accuracy was deadly, dealing a crippling blow with each shot. He and his captains tried to block the cannonballs, but they always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Anytime it looked like they might intercept one, it would turn out to be a curveball and hit a different ship instead. Reluctantly, he called for the ships to retreat to Marineford. At this rate, they would only be sunk before the real fight even started. They would lose half their ships before even entering their own cannons' effective range. The pirates would fall once they entered Marineford regardless. Admiral Aokiji had made certain they had nowhere else to go, having quite a bit of time freezing the water both wide and deep. Seeing the Marines flee before them, the pirates got a morale boost and cheered. Cherry let out a breath. Fighting so seriously without a worthy opponent was mentally exhausting. It was mind-numbing in the same way sweeping the courtyard back home in the dojo was. Their course was set, and they sailed directly through the gates of justice and into Marineford. There was no signs of Whitebeard anywhere, unfortunately. They had hoped that Whitebeard might be waiting off in the distance or something. No such luck. Aokiji had also frozen a large ring around Marineford, to make it that much harder to break out. Well shoot. Cherry spoke, annoyed. Guess I'll have to do that after all. We'll have to get closer to the ice wall though. No one knew what this mysterious technique she'd mentioned was, as she had refused to say much of anything about it. Only that it should be powerful and likely dangerous. As they turned their ships to make for the wall, there was a beam of light that stretched from the fortress to the lead ship. At the end of which, Admiral Borsellino suddenly appeared. He quickly scanned the pirates dressed as Marines, and spotted two that looked like Ace. There are two of you? I guess one is a fake. He flashed and kicked the closest one off the ship. That one happened to be Bon Clay, disguised as Ace to increase confusion. Not that one then, Borsellino quickly discounted. As the real Ace would have easily taken that attack, they had no armament Haki applied, due to his Logia fruit. He flashed again and grabbed towards Ace, who tried to avoid his grasping, Haki-coated hand to no avail. At the same time, he was already forming the beam of light he would return with. Only two people were close enough and fast enough to even attempt to intervene. Cherry, who was already thrusting at Borsellino's head with her spear. And Luffy, who had entered gear second the moment he saw the flash. Luffy didn't attack Borsellino, however. Instead, he latched onto Ace and held on for dear life. Borsellino easily dodged Cherry's attack and dragged Ace back to Marineford, albeit at a considerably slower speed than he arrived. He could turn other people into light like himself after all. All of this happened in the span of a single second. Damn it, Cherry shouted, turning her gaze towards Marineford. Everyone else was momentarily shocked at just how ruthlessly efficient Borsellino could be when he was actually trying. You want war? I'll give you a war. Cherry muttered with a frigid stare. She didn't care so much about Ace, but that idiot Luffy had gotten himself caught too. She knew they wouldn't spare him, regardless of who his grandfather was. All the powerhouses in the fortress could feel her eyes upon them. Most couldn't tell who it was, but they thought if that person didn't die today, then the world government would be in serious trouble in the future. Chapter 114, Whitebeard. Admiral Borsellino landed on the execution platform, where Marines were waiting to place sea-stone cuffs on Ace. Fortunately for them, they were prepared for some trouble and had more than one pair, so they could cuff the rubber man that unexpectedly came along with them. Ace was cuffed immediately and wasn't able to put up fight, and Luffy was no match for an admiral, so he was quickly restrained as well. The nearby Garp grimaced and shouted, "Luffy?" Sengoku glanced at him, but Garp didn't make any moves to rescue either of them. He looked back at the 5 Marine warships and saw that they had foolishly changed course directly towards the fortress. It saved them the trouble of capturing them later, as they couldn't split up their forces before they dealt with Whitebeard. Hawkeye saw Garp's internal conflict and turned his gaze towards the oncoming ships, one of which carried the person with this somehow familiar Haki. He hoped that Garp was the only one who would have an unexpected family reunion today. Hancock was barely containing her worry and fury seeing Luffy chained up on the execution platform. She almost rushed directly to him, but managed to stay her hand at least until Whitebeard showed up. Sengoku stepped onto the execution platform, and turned towards the Den Den Mushi that was broadcasting the execution to the entire world. He told a story about a woman who managed to fool them, Ace's mother, and that Ace's father was none other than Goldie Roger. In addition, he gestured to Luffy, who's still squirming in his chains. Since we have him here in custody, we will be executing Monkey D. Luffy as well. Not only is he the adoptive brother of Fire Fist Ace, he is also the son of the Revolutionary Dragon. Ivankov was a tiny bit annoyed that he wasn't told that Ace wasn't also the son of Dragon, but just Luffy's sworn brother. It didn't much matter at this point though, as Luffy had been caught. Jinbe looked both determined and worried. We should start from the edges and work our way forward. Marines have always been lazy, so the admirals probably won't move personally unless absolutely necessary. Then we can stall until Whitebeard arrives while reducing the enemy's forces. We don't need to wait for Whitebeard. He's already here, Cherry said, baffling everyone. No one spoke out against her though, as she didn't seem to be in a good mood. Their ships got in range of the Marines' firearms, so they started a firefight until the ships reached the outside of Marineford's crescent, where they started disembarking and attacking the Marines in melee as well. Cherry didn't make any moves, however. She was waiting until the right moment. As Jinbe expected, none of the admirals made a move, just a few vice-admirals at most. Soon, a long stretch of ships appeared out of nowhere on the horizon, and no one knew how, except Cherry, who could sense more people moving below the water towards the center of Marineford. Sploosh. 4 ships with large whale figureheads appeared in the center of Marineford, surprising everyone. At the forefront was the Moby Dick, Whitebeard's flagship, and naturally Whitebeard was aboard it. Gururara, Whitebeard laughed. You wait right there, Ace. Whitebeard reared his arms seemingly in preparation to strike something, and when his arm struck out, cracks appeared in the air itself and the sea quaked. Giant tsunamis formed on either side of Marineford and threatened to wash everything and everyone away with them. He exchanged some words with Ace blaming himself for this whole mess and Whitebeard insisting it was his own fault. And they would have if Aokiji hadn't stepped in and frozen them solid, along with the water in the bay. Aokiji went to attack Whitebeard, but was easily stopped by Whitebeard's counterattack. Soon after, the battle went into full swing and quickly turned into a chaotic battlefield. All the big shots who had their eyes on Whitebeard saw a figure land on the Moby Dick and casually walk towards Whitebeard. They recognized her quickly as Harpin D. Cherry, a rare example of a pirate that had a bounty higher than her own captain. Hawkeye's usual frown got a bit deeper, and nobody on the Marine side had a good feeling about this. Cherry walked towards Whitebeard at a walking pace, until the 1st Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates, Marco the Phoenix, stepped in her path. "Where do you think you're going, little lady? This isn't the place for you," Marco said calmly, though his words were laced with an implicit threat. If it wasn't for the fact that he recognized her as a member of Ace's little brother's crew, he would have attacked her immediately. "Don't be so protective, Marco. She can't do anything to me, let her through," Whitebeard spoke casually. Borsellino attempted to fire his laser at Whitebeard, but Marco moved to intercept it. Whitebeard studied Cherry as she resumed her approach and didn't even flinch at the two powerhouses fighting only a couple dozen meters away from her. Cherry stopped at a respectable distance and looked the man up and down. She had to respect him as a warrior. He had one foot in the grave. Here he stood on his own 2 feet, as steady as a mountain. She wondered if even death could topple this monster. "I've got an offer for you. How would you like to return to your prime for a little while?" Cherry asked. Whitebeard scoffed. "I don't need any help from a youngster. Are you sure? Is your pride worth more than the life of your beloved son?" Cherry said. Whitebeard frowned. This little girl was getting on his nerves. He made eye contact with her for the first time and almost flinched. It wasn't her countenance but what he saw hiding behind her eyes. Whitebeard may have been blinded to Blackbeard's true nature because of his love for his found family, but he was actually quite good at reading people. Staring into the depths of those black pupils, he could swear there was a genuine devil standing before him. They weren't so different from Rock's or Roger's eyes. They weren't the kind of eyes that some youngster should have. He actually stopped to think over her words seriously then. What she was offering wasn't something that would harm his reputation at all, and he really would like to feel the strength of his youth again. The problem was whether to trust this little girl. It might be a trick to weaken him instead, although her own captain was currently on the chopping block as well. It wouldn't have been the first time the world government planted an undercover agent amongst a pirate crew. "Stop thinking so much, you old coot," Cherry said, bringing Whitebeard out of his thoughts. "I don't want to die, so I'm not going to stab you in the back. Do we got a deal or not?" Cherry extended a hand out for him to shake. Whitebeard inwardly chastised himself, since when did he start to lose his boldness? Sengoku, who had been observing the meeting between Cherry and Whitebeard, suddenly had a terrible feeling when Cherry held out her hand to Whitebeard. "Stop them right now," Sengoku shouted, suddenly changing into his golden Buddha form and charging the Moby Dick. Admiral Sakazuki followed right behind. Even Garp moved, his instincts screaming at him. Whitebeard clasped his large hand over Cherry's forearm. Immediately Whitebeard felt something rush up his arm and spread out in his body. None of Whitebeard's crew could stop the three powerhouses of the Marines from reaching the Moby Dick. They prepared to attack the two of them all at once at full power. Boom! All three of them were struck with a massive shockwave, as the air shattered from one side of the bay to the other. "Gurararara!" Whitebeard laughed with great gusto. His lungs no longer hurt, his bones no longer creaked, his heart pounded with a strength it hadn't had for decades. Cherry hadn't been using hyperbole when she said she'd give him the strength of his prime back. Perhaps you could even say he was stronger than his prime, as he still possessed his many years of experience making up for his declining strength. "We're fucked." Every single present Marine had the same thought, whilst the people of the world watching through the Denden Mushi broadcast paled in horror. Cherry was huffing and puffing behind Whitebeard. She hadn't been sure how much energy his mortal body could handle, but ultimately she didn't have a chance to find out. Whitebeard had sucked up 90% of her total vital energy, and still wanted more. Naturally, she didn't want to give him everything she had and stopped prematurely. Cherry slunk away, intending to climb up the Moby Dick's mast-he crow's nest to recuperate a bit. Although Whitebeard had been careful, she still took a big hit from Whitebeard's attack. She wasn't out of the fight just yet though. She wouldn't let the old man have all the fun. Chapter 115, New Technique. "What the hell happened to you, Edward? It's like I'm fighting the you from 30 years ago," Garp said, shaking off his hand which ached a bit from the counterattack he just took. "Gurara, a new special technique of mine, don't worry about it," Whitebeard lied through his teeth. Although Cherry had done this for him right before their eyes, it was such an outlandish thing to do that it was easier to believe Whitebeard's little lie about it. Cherry would be under a great deal of suspicion still, but without solid proof they might just let her off for it. After all, who could reasonably believe that some upstart rookie was capable of empowering the legendary Whitebeard to such a degree? Sengoku, Garp and Sakazuki pulled a tactically retreat, not yet ready to go all out against an even stronger Whitebeard than anticipated. Whitebeard allowed this as going all out would not only endanger everyone here, enemy and ally alike, but may also force the Marine's hand to execute Ace on the spot rather than let him potentially escape. Better to let his allies weaken the Marine's forces first before taking more direct action. Cherry climbed on top of the crow's nest of the Moby Dick after taking a quick rest to settle her vital energy. Now is as good a time as any to try this out, Cherry thought. She placed her hands in front of her, palms facing outwards. She activated her devil fruit and focused on the air. A gentle breeze suddenly picked up and seemed to converge on the point in front of her. No one seemed to take notice as the battle was far more chaotic than what she was doing. A humming sound started to reverberate and got steadily louder. After about 30 seconds, a pinpoint of light could be seen forming in the center of the gentle vortex of air. Meanwhile, Hancock had kindly received the keys to Luffy's and Ace's handcuffs from a very nice Marine. He snuck her way behind the execution platform and chucked the key within Luffy's reach. "Hurry up, Luffy, the annoying men are coming back," Hancock whispered to him. Her observation Haki warned her of a threat and turned to see a flying sword attack from Hawkeye's direction. Hawkeye watched her dodge his attack, which wasn't all that surprising as he was only putting in the bare minimum of effort so that the world government couldn't complain about a lack of participation. A strange sound was picked up in his ears and he turned to find the source, ignoring the enraged ramblings directed at him by the Kuja Empress. He found his target of interest as he looked up at the crow's nest of the Moby Dick, where he saw his supposed daughter, though he didn't have any doubts about that fact. She appeared to be struggling a great deal with her face turned beet red with bulging veins in her forehead and bloodshot eyes. As to what she was struggling with, that was likely to be the ball of intense light right in front of her, that was roughly half a meter in diameter, and was too bright to properly identify. The loud humming of the ball of light as well as the brightness of the thing had started to draw the attention of many on the battlefield. Cherry started looking around for something, scanning the crowd left to right. Her eyes stopped when they met with Hawkeye's. Hawkeye wasn't really sure what to do as it was sort of their first meeting and simply stared back stiffly. Cherry's face split into an evil mischievous smile and she pulled her hands, and the orb of light along with them to point in Hawkeye's direction. "Uh-oh," was all Hawkeye could say before all hell broke loose. "Solar flare?" Cherry spoke normally but amplified her voice so that all could hear it. "Scream." The sound of 1,000 voices screaming in perfect harmony rang out. Burning plasma with the heat of the sun was released away from Cherry in a cone of solar flames. Hawkeye ran away as quickly as a father going out to get some milk. The Marines that were nearby ran away as well, but many of them didn't make it all the way out and suffered from severe burns across their bodies, instantly removing them from the fight. The center point of the affected area was turned into a large crater filled with molten rock. "Does she resent me that much?" Hawkeye wondered, surprised to find that it stung at his heart to think of it. He turned to look at Cherry. She was making a silly face at him with her tongue stuck out at him, but he did not find the resentment he expected. It seems that was a practical joke, Hawkeye thought, which had him reconsidering if he really wanted to reconnect with this troublesome daughter of his. Cherry seemed to laugh at the conflicted look on his face, then she glanced towards the execution platform. Hawkeye followed her gaze and saw that Luffy and Ace were no longer there. Whoops, well, Hawkeye thought. He didn't really care if they escaped or not in the end, but started searching for them anyways. In a city on an island in the first half of the Grand Line, an old woman had been loudly complaining the actions of one Harpin D. Cherry. After the solar flare attack was released towards the world's strongest swordsman, Hawkeye, however, she suddenly changed her tune. "Light that bastard's ass on fire, Cherry. Give another one for your mother, your grandfather, and I too while you're at it." "Ha ha," Grandma Angela laughed with a certain madness in her voice and a half-drunk bottle of bourbon in her hand. Bork and Slank were just grateful they weren't near any crowds while their master was openly revealing her relation with a world-infamous criminal. Not that they had any bad feeling towards Cherry, but they didn't want to paint a target on their backs. Back at Marineford, Captain Hino witnessed the attack Cherry delivered with her own eyes. She was having trouble reconciling the Cherry she was seeing now with the one she met back at her home. Was the Cherry she met before just an act? Was the Cherry she was witnessing right now some sort of sick joke or trick? Or perhaps was it her own worldview that was too black and white, too eager to assign the labels of good and evil? She shook those unnecessary thoughts out of her mind, and focused on what was in front of her, that being Whitebeard's pirates, which she could deal with without any complicated questions about her sense of justice. Cherry, on the other hand, had decided to sneak away and have a look around the fortress for any goodies. They didn't have any devil fruit laying around as far as she could tell, which was disappointing, but perhaps there were some other goodies to find. She needed to recuperate some of her energy reserve anyways, and the battle wouldn't reach its climax for a little while. Cherry burrowed beneath the ice and made her way to the stone of the wall and dug into it as well. Soon she broke into an open space that appeared to be a storage room. Poking around there wasn't really anything of interest here, so she moved towards the door and started wandering the halls. There were only a few people down here, so she didn't need to be particularly careful. Tang tang tang. The familiar sound of hammer meeting metal was heard after walking around for a few minutes. In fact, it was a little too familiar. Soon Cherry realized why. "I found you," Cherry said, her face twisting into the countenance of a demon. Chapter 116, An Old Acquaintance. Cherry followed the sound of clanging metal. She knew this sound, she had heard it often for many years, and she couldn't possibly mistake it for anything else. This was the technique of her former teacher and master. The very same one who used her own masterpiece to kill her. Memories from long ago surfaced in her mind. Of the day her master found her half-starved and begging in the street. Of the very first dagger she had smithed under his guidance. Of how excited she was to show him that she had finally caught up to him, and the sense of betrayal that had followed soon after. He had been as closest to a father figure she had ever possessed. All ruined by a moment of greed, she reached a heavily reinforced sea-stone alloy door. The sounds were coming from right behind it. Cherry pulled out her spear and easily destroyed the lock with a sharp thrust, and then kicked the door open. The clanging of hammer on metal didn't stop as she stepped inside. Before a very exquisite forge was a young man who looked about the same age as herself, hammering away at an unfinished blade. Cherry didn't stop him. Instead, she observed his every movement, making sure that she was correct. It was possible he could be an apprentice mimicking his master, but she was sure now, it was too skillful to be an apprentice, and anyone he taught would have developed their own style by the time they reached this level. He stopped hammering at the blade and stuck it back into the forge to bring the heat back up. Then he stretched his fingers and turned to look at her. "Although you rudely barged into my smithy, at least you have the sense not to interrupt me. Who are you and what do you want?" He spoke curtly, not the least bit nervous. "You know who I am." Cherry spoke in a language that wasn't native to this world. His eyes widened almost imperceivably. "I see. You've come to kill me then?" he asked, glancing at the spear in her hand. "Not bad work given the garbage we have to work with in this world." "A bound weapon? First I'll get answers from you, then I'll send you on your way swiftly," Cherry replied, not answering his own question. "Ask away," he said, leaning against a workbench. "What first? Why did I do it? You might get a kick out of that one. First tell me if and who you've told about immortal techniques from our world," Cherry ordered, maintaining her vigilance. "No one, not even that creepy undead bastard. I'd sooner die before giving away one of my advantages," he said, taking a metal file to his nails. "Good, you can die now." Cherry brandished her spear. Wait. You really don't want to know anything else?" He got flustered. Seeing her momentarily pause, he started to plead his case. "I knew this day would come eventually, the day I came to my senses about 6 years ago. I've had my answers to whatever questions you might ask all figured out, you know. At least let me do that much." Cherry was annoyed. Why couldn't the bastard just accept his death like a man instead of trying to stall for time? "Fine, no one can save you in any case," Cherry said. She was somewhat curious, and knowing would help her to let it go. "Why don't we start with why then? It's not like I wanted to do it, you know. I did care about you somewhat, but it was you or me," he said. "You see, I was a fraud. All my greatest works, especially the Spear of Eons, were robbed from their real creators and passed off as my own. The other masters were starting to get suspicious since I hadn't produced anything comparable in a long time. Then you came along with that sword. You expect me to believe that you cared about me when you murdered me?" Cherry growled in response. "I know it sounds like a lie, but it's the truth. I have always lived while putting myself before all others, but that doesn't mean I couldn't care about someone else," he said, leaning back in a subconscious attempt to distance himself. "You said you came to yourself 6 years ago. Why did you take so long when I came to myself 18 years ago?" Cherry calmed herself and asked. She had her own ideas, but wanted his opinion on the matter. Fraud or not, he at least had a great deal more experience than her. "Ah, I see. That makes sense. You were only stabbed, while I was at the epicenter of the sword's self-destruction. The injuries to my soul were much greater, so it took longer to recover. Though frankly it's surprising either of us recovered. He spoke habitually, starting to lecture her. I suspect there must have been a problem with your soul annihilating inscription, or perhaps it's just that soul destruction has been misunderstood the whole time. After all, if the soul is sent outside the myriad realms, it accomplishes basically the same thing. Cherry thought that made sense. Perhaps she'd try to study soul-related devil fruit more closely in the future, and see if she could work out what happened, but that was for a different time. Well, that's all I want to know. Goodbye and good riddance. Cherry thrust her spear without holding back. Her old master didn't dodge but instead smirked at her. Soon she found out why, as a clawed skeletal hand latched onto her spear only centimeters from piercing his heart. Ha ha ha, foolish girl, not every powerhouse is involved in the war. He sneered. Wilson Alexander held the spear firmly in his grasp. That was a close one. Cherry felt foolish. She had let her emotions cloud her judgment and forgotten about this bag of bones, and that she couldn't pick him up with life sense. Now uphold your end of the deal. Kill her and send her soul to hell, then I'll tell you all my secrets. The young blacksmith shouted. Couldn't even do it yourself, huh, coward? Cherry mocked, but she was quite anxious now. Wilson didn't have a reason to kill her before, but he did now, and she wasn't sure she could escape him. Wilson surprised both of the reincarnated immortals, however. He placed a hand on the younger man's head, then pulled Cherry's spear to pierce his heart. I was almost too late to send you off, young man. Wilson spoke in a grandfatherly tone, but his face was twisted with a sadistic perversion. What? Were the only words the young man could speak before the light vanished from his eyes. Wilson pulled a ghostly wisp from the man's head that struggled in his grasp. He turned to look at the flabbergasted Cherry. You want to know why? He said. Cherry nodded. I already told you about my hobby. Between the two of you, his soul is so much more appealing. A soul from another world filled with so much sin and darkness, it'll be delicious to send him to hell. His voice trailed off as he unhinged his jaw and slurped up the wisp. But Cherry thought she heard it scream faintly as it was pulled into the dark abyss below. What about me then? Cherry asked tentatively. You can go, just take credit for his death for me, will you? That's the only reason I didn't kill him earlier. They would have annoyed me a lot about killing their talented new blacksmith. Wilson said, but he saw she was a bit confused. You've got all the time in the world to become more delicious? I can wait. He licked his lips, then stalked out of the room. Cherry watched him leave, keeping her guard up in case he changed his mind. After a while she sighed as some of the tension left her body. She glanced around the room. This is some pretty high-quality metal. Guess I won't leave empty-handed, she thought, scooping it all up into a thick bag she found nearby. Time to go. Cherry scurried out, not even taking a second glance at the crumpled form of her former master. He was behind her now, no longer a plague upon her second chance. I'm definitely going to kill that old bastard when I'm strong enough, though. You're not going to eat my soul, sicko, she thought as she worked her way back to the battle. Cherry burrowed out of the ground where there weren't any nearby Marines, and made her way towards the battle from behind their lines. She looked over the scene to see what changes had taken place. A horned giant with yellow skin that was big enough to make other giants look small was collapsed on the wall that was between the bay and the Marine forces. Pacifistas had shown up behind Whitebeard's allies and started to lay waste to them. One of Whitebeard's allies had stabbed him through the chest in a sudden betrayal, though with the energy Cherry had loaned him, that injury wasn't all that serious. The surprising thing was that Whitebeard forgave the traitor. Whitebeard was a great model for healthy masculinity, she supposed. Ace and Luffy, who had been freed from their restraints, were having a lot of trouble fighting their way out as they were surrounded by enemies. In particular, it seemed that Garp had decided to stop them. "Since this is the path you've chosen, you'll have to walk it over my dead body," Garp said to them. Though his words were harsh and unyielding, the tears streaking down his face betrayed his conflicted emotions. Cherry rushed through the crowds of Marines with her traceless steps. By the time the Marines she passed by realized what happened, she was already beyond their reach. Garp swung a fist towards Luffy, who was charging him. Unexpectedly, it wasn't Luffy that he clashed with, but the spear of a young woman with sharp eyes. "Hey you old coot, how about I do you a huge favor and keep you company for a while, Cherry spoke with a smile. Garp showed no annoyance or anger at her intervention. Instead, there was an immeasurable relief and gratitude. Garp pushed her back with his hockey-coated fist. "I won't go easy on you, girl. That's good, old man. How would I be able to face Luffy after killing you, huh?" Cherry teased. Ace and Luffy took a hint and used the opportunity to push through the throngs of Marines away from Garp and Cherry. Before they started in earnest, the world seemed to tilt. "Whitebeard," Garp muttered, suggesting that it was the legendary pirate's doing. "That there is a real man, Garp. You need to pull your head out of your ass and see what's really important." Cherry lectured. "This is no time for talking, fight me." Garp launched himself at her, his indomitable fist bearing down on her. Cherry held nothing back, she couldn't afford to against this man. As she poured her hockey into her spear, thrusting it towards the old man with all the vibrational energy she could muster, she felt a familiar tickle of something far beneath the surface of herself. That last time she had felt it was her fight against Wilson Alexander at Water 7. Boom. The clash between fist and spear sent both of them taking several steps backwards. Nearby Marines who had been hoping to interfere were sent flying away, clearing a circle for their fight to take place in. A few more exchanges occurred, with Cherry always losing out but not by too much. These were just probing attacks, however, to gauge each other's strength. Soon Garp got serious and Cherry was in a real tough spot. She was always on the back foot but hadn't taken any direct attacks yet. All the while Cherry was trying to draw upon whatever power it was that was lurking beneath. She had an idea of what it was, but didn't know what she needed to do to bring it out. "You aren't going to get anywhere with an attitude like that, girl. You won't even be able to beat an old man like me," Garp commented during one of their rare very short respites. "What do you mean, old man? I'm doing the best I can here," Cherry said, fending off another punch. "You're fighting to stall, not to win. That's fine for anyone else, but if you want to get somewhere in the world you'll need to be more like Luffy." Garp said nothing more and sped up his onslaught. "Why would I fight to win? I know I can't win against him, so what's the point in deluding myself?" Cherry thought. Then an idea started to form in her mind. She looked over at Luffy, who, despite obviously being out of his league here, seemed to have every confidence in his ability to succeed in his goal. "Let's try it then." Cherry, though, then entered a half-meditative state. She tried to convince herself that she could beat Garp despite his overwhelming strength. Cherry's eyes widened and she went on a desperate offensive. She started to take his attacks now, but she also started to break through his defenses as well. Garp sensed the change that came over her, and could only grin widely. "Me and my big mouth." A Marine captain tried to take advantage of Cherry's lower defenses and aimed his bazooka at her. Cherry sensed his intent and glanced at him. Voom! The Marine captain suddenly collapsed to the ground unconscious, baffling his comrades around him as to what happened. Garp and a few powerhouses that were paying attention knew better though. Conqueror's hockey, they thought simultaneously. So that's what it was after all. Interesting. Cherry spoke to herself. It didn't really help in this fight against Garp right now, but she had high expectations for the future. The Marines raised some sort of steel wall around the bay, but Whitebeard shattered them left and right with his devil fruit power. "Things aren't looking up for your side, Garp. Sure you don't want to switch?" Cherry mocked. Garp only shook his head. Cherry brandished her spear. She intended to win this fight despite the poor odds. Once poor, the old man and young woman clashed. Like before, Cherry was fighting in a seemingly crazed manner, allowed strikes to get past her guard. However, Garp started to take more damage now, not to mention that his arms felt like they were on fire from all the Hashokan blows they'd taken. "What kind of technique is this? It even penetrates my armament hockey somewhat," Garp thought. If Chinjiao had heard this, he would be crying tears of hatred. Whilst Garp had countless tiny fractures in his arms and many cuts and shallow stab wounds, Cherry was starting to look like a mess. Even with her body that ordinary people couldn't hope to damage, she looked like she was at death's door. The Marines around her had gone pale from fear at how this woman, who ought to be dead a few times over, was still fighting as hard as she was in the beginning of the fight, and against the hero Garp too. Cherry's tactics started to get wilder and wilder. At one point she even bit down on Garp's right ear, and took a chunk out of it. "You damn brat." Garp's original gratitude towards Cherry for giving him a way to avoid choosing between family and duty. Now he was just angry. Whitebeard was cleaving his way through the Marines like a hot knife through butter. The three admirals and Sengoku had to personally face him to keep him from advancing, but of course Whitebeard wasn't alone, so they were on the losing side. Garp was running out of stamina. The years have not been kind to him. Cherry, on the other hand, wasn't even out of breath, which he found to be absurd considering her injuries. Time to end this, old man. It's my win, Cherry taunted. Not if I can help it, Garp charged her. Cherry thrust her spear to meet his fist, but the impact didn't come this time. The spear simply vanished from her hand, and in its place there appeared a revolver. Bang! Garp didn't manage to coat his torso with hockey in time, and he felt a bullet ripped through his abdomen. That wasn't the end either, as Cherry took advantage of his surprise and exhaustion to land a dropkick into his face. Garp fell backward and skid along the ground for a few dozen meters before coming to a stop. His strength was failing him, and he barely managed to prop himself up enough to see Cherry run away. Garp plopped himself back down and waited for the medic marines to start fussing over him. He was out of the fight now, so he could rest easy knowing Sengoku couldn't complain too much. Chapter 118: A Wild Blackbeard Appears.
Sadly, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I would appreciate it if you would like and subscribe for the next part of this story.